Everyone has something to share in either wisdom, story, or logic, and it's clearly amazing to hear all the differing missing links discovered by people, unique to their own journeys, and in how they have come to discover them. Together, we can help to build a bigger picture for a better future, for a brighter tomorrow. Let's stand united. Let's remove the veils, and let's create a new world together. Are you that missing link? Join Jesse Hale on the Missing Link Talk Show as he helps to unveil the mystery through the unique wisdom and story of others. Only on Real Revolution Radio X.
Welcome everybody here to the Missing Link. We got a special September 11th 911 edition. I've been recently introduced to someone who I find is quite brilliant in his research, the Desert Owl. I'm going to read a little brief introduction for everybody so you all get to know a little bit more about who he is. So, in the essence, the Desert Owl discusses the history of the world and how the unseen hand has been running it from the beginning of time. Who they are and how they have founded all of the first great civilizations that are found all around the world. About who the giants really were and the ancient Aryan caste and slave systems, the priesthoods, the anti-gravity, V-Manis, the Earth base, misnomered UFOs, which are man-made, the control of all forms of communication, commerce, religion, mass media, pseudo-politics, etc. It is the grand deception that is used to control all of mankind, and all instituted through the four main religions of the world, in particular, used as their grand cover. The cyber code has been revealed to me because I have become adept within the study of the ancient alphabet, communication, symbolism, religion, custom, law, cosmology, and mythology, not to mention the fallacy of today's political science and pseudoscience in particular. Desert Owl can also define the true nature of their warfare, their shell game of bringing one civilization up for the temporary use and then taking it down for the next 500 years generational cycle, as symbolized by the classic phoenix. Desert Owl discusses the ultimate in mind control and ancient art of the financial control, the secret societies and their blood occult rituals, and how they wage all wars throughout all time. Through the nations that they have created, which are all imagination, plantations, and mere corporations. They have taken blood oaths to surrender their self-will and mind to their blind goddess, who has demanded our blood from the very beginning of time. They communicate to their minions through the movies, TV, and using us for our ingenuity, for our collective, constructive labor, for experimentation, and in the end, they intend to kill us all. They have given us full notice of what they are doing and what they fully intend to do, while all the general population, the sheeple, they merely go there to be entertained. The New World Order is the old world order from the beginning of time. There is a major cosmic natural disaster that is about to happen on Earth, and they know it because they have engineered all of it, while they are cleverly leaving us in the dark. Hence the reason that they have built hundreds of underground bases all around the world, while they are leaving all of the people to remain unprepared, uninformed, and above ground, so that when it all comes, the mere 5% who will survive above ground will die from the weaknesses and disease that have been generated from all of the poisons they have been feeding us, from the chemical aerosol spraying of our sky, to fluoride in the water, to tainted injections, to fake food, etc., etc. They have enslaved us all at birth by the clever means of deception, because we, most all, are their cattle, chattel property. And because they merely wanted to harness our labor, what they always needed, which is what backs most of the world's currency through the birth certificate. But they are all through with us now, as it is written in stone, as it can be seen written in the Georgia Guidestones. We are a virus upon the earth. To know the truth is to be empowered and to be prepared. We may not be able to stop what has done and what is about to happen, but the innocent and the decent people of the earth deserve to know. So welcome, welcome, welcome everybody. We got a lot of people already in here, and welcome to the Missing Link, which is love inspiring new knowledge. Desert Owl, how are you today, Desert? Oh, hang on. How are you today, Desert?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Testing. Okay, good. Yeah, I honored to be on the Missing Link today. I feel very much like a missing link, and my ability to get out a message that is constantly quashed by the the mainstream narrative. The truth, as the axiom goes, is stranger than fiction. And so, what I have to share today, especially for the younger generation that's only heard the propaganda, it's going to be quite an eye opener to realize the pattern of an elite group that is separate and considers us slaves. It's just slave. There is no conspiracy. There is only slave management. And so that's what we're going to talk about today as the third truth, because the fundamental principle behind that title comes from Dmitry Kozlov, a former Soviet military officer who specialized in handling nuclear munitions and underground testing. And so the Soviets at the time, and all others that managed nuclear material knew how these towers were taken down. And so most people will hear this for the first time. It's a mind blower, but nonetheless, the truth needs to be known. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the third truth.
Sounds good, and exactly, the truth needs to be known, and that's what the Missing Link is about, is bringing in, all kinds of different people's interpretations on what's going on. And let's start off with your journey, how you've come to be, how you've come to know the information you know, and kind of lead us up to where we are here today.
Okay, very good. Jesse,
just one sec. Before that, I just wanted you to explain, are you shy to be on camera, or is there another reason possibly why that you're not on camera here with us today? Because someone just asked about that.
Yeah, well, it's because I'm a targeted individual, and the community I'm in, it's a small community, and therefore the Freemasons have been gang stalking me, trying to do every dirty trick in the book, including hitting me with automobiles and breaking in my apartment, all of the things that they do when you know too much, basically. So they've been wanting to. Last couple approaches were to take photographs of me, and I don't need to give them any help,
Okay, and so that should explain that, because he wants to protect, himself as much as possible, but still getting out the information. So please fill us in for anybody who doesn't know who you are, and how, just let us know your journey until we got to this point where you're here on the Missing Link.
Right. Well, I'm gonna just segue from what we just talked about, because as a political activist, I started 30 years ago. Had two organizations, and I'll mention them real quick, but I just want to say that in my area of targeting, I've had near a dozen attempts on my life, 6 along with automobiles. The first time I ended up in a ditch, and because I serve a great Heavenly Father, I was able to walk home. I rolled over the entire automobile, and not a bone was broken in me. But after that, I watched where I was going, and all the other attempts were failed, because I'm very cautious about where I go, and I look behind me, and So the threat is real. Just like we witnessed the murder of 3,000 people in a building that somehow got associated with foreign insurgents, when it was really a domestic operation. That's what we'll talk about today. But as far as my background, I'm a spiritual guy. I was never interested in politics or any of those things. And so I was studying my scriptures, ancient history, symbolism, word etymology, all of those things. And then I got stuck in an 18-wheeler to, bring food home for the family. And then in a year of listening to talk radio, I heard people saying the same things over and over. When you hear people repeating things, there's got to be some truth to it. So I did my own investigation. Things like there is no law that says you have to have a driver's license, or there's no law that says you have to have a social security number, all these things. And so I investigated and found out, these things are true. And so in my own research, being a researcher, then I realized after a year we were in trouble. I wrote a thesis, six-page thesis on what I thought we were being run by, which I thought at the time thought it was an oligarchy, the wealthy. I know better now. It's more than that. But I had working for my publishing company at the time a retired intelligence officer who turned out to be the during the Bay of Pigs invasion with Cuba, was a Navy photojournalist. Then he went into the Defense Intelligence Agency, and then was also Boy Scout Mission Control for 2 years, and also knew the Apollo 5 astronauts who were burned alive in their tin can program because they wanted to go public about the fraudulent nature of NASA. By the way, NASA means deception, okay, in Hebrew. So, so I had what the Heavenly Father has always done with me is put me at the right place at the right time to see something, or to know something. I would, just like he put me under a squadron of 30 UFOs on the evening of the spring equinox, Easter, coming south of Memphis, the city of the pyramid, going towards Jackson, Mississippi in my 18-wheeler, and then ended up under a squadron of about 30 UFOs. So you always wonder what it would be like just to witness a UFO. Try being under a squadron of them and see how it feels. And so
did you say beam me up, Scotty?
I said beam me out of here. I'm going back to Texas. I figured it was game over. What I thought I was witnessing must have been happening in every city of the planet. I thought this was the real Orson Welles War of the Worlds, but everything is a shell game, and it's a test pilot program, and they're coming out. Now we know they're out big time with these so-called UFOs, but it's really all Earth-based, all man-made. It's the greatest show on Earth, and it's the grand deception. So I had two organizations. When I realized we were in trouble and got fully informed, then I formed my first organization, Council for the National Interest, the antithesis of the Council on Foreign Relations, which runs all public policy for the banking interests and the Vatican. And then after that, after I had a divorce, then this will do that. This type of stuff will do that to a family. Then I had my second organization, United Truckers Defending the Constitution. That's when I went over the road, no longer having a family, and did a survey, interviewed people all coast to coast, took out people that ran for president, and interviewed them. And so it was quite an experience and a wake up. But I met a lot of great people that were trying to do the right thing. And in spite of all of these great people, nothing has changed. It's gone from bad to worse. And it's because from the beginning, it has been orchestrated. And that's part of the story, because the people think that the U.S., just like Canada, U.S. is a little different by its nature. They think that it's their country, but it's not their country. It never was. It was. That's why they call it the Great Experiment, because they're experimenting with our minds, with their strategies on how to manipulate our minds and to control the herd. Okay, so so I think that probably covered the one thing that was unique about me in my ability to interpret what was going on is the fact that I was a historian, studying ancient history, studying symbolism, word etymology. Because what I realized when I got involved in the political arena was that they were speaking in an ancient form of communication with symbolism and words. And so I picked up on that, and so I was able to to see who these people were from a broader perspective than most average people. As my first card here, I took some notes before the program, just to follow a certain direction. But people are not journalists. And so because people are not journalists, they my screen went black, and I'm trying to figure out what happened here. Because people are not, okay, it's back on. The people are not journalists, so they don't have, you know, the critical skills for being able to explore all the aspects, you know how to, you know, find information. And just like a good one, you know, with Alex Jones, you know, he's really a former comedian, Bill Hicks, and then he's acknowledged his family are CIA and, you know, and Jewish Mossad and all that, and still, you know, people don't get it. They still follow a guy that is totally, you know, keeping us under the spell. You know, they have always got the best information. That's classic for these type of people. But yet they are steering the narrative. And they always want you to call your congressman. They always want to talk about Washington like it's legitimate when it's been nothing other than a shell game from the beginning, and especially after 33 with the banking interest that took over officially through the bankruptcy of the United States Corporation. So did I answer all of the questions about, you know, my ability, you know, how I got here?
Yeah, and what, you know, what year was the 30 UFOs?
That was 1997. That was, I just finished doing my Sunday radio program called America's Driving Force in a truck stop, 76 truck stop in Jackson, Tennessee. And then I got back in my truck to go make my early the next day delivery, got on the loop in Memphis in the western part of Kentucky or Tennessee, got on the south loop and then started heading south to Jackson, Mississippi, and then it started getting dark and I saw those lights in the background in the horizon coming towards me. I'm going south, they're going northeast, and you know, and then all of a sudden next thing I'm under it when it was pitch black. By the time it, you know, got pitch black, I was under them. And I pulled them over, you know, my truck over to do a survey. I rolled down my window. There was one hovering. They had a chain link of them hovering along the freeway like sentries, while the mass were moving over in mass. And so the one hovering right across on the other side of the interstate, right above the trees, you know, it was hypnotic because there's a light flashing on top, a green, red, yellow light, but all of a sudden I realized, and it lit up the trees just like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, lit up the trees with a bright white heliarc light. But then all of a sudden I click and I said, wait a minute, that thing is hovering there and it's not making a sound, no sound, you know. So that's how close I got to one of them. Then one of them went off of its pattern and started coming towards my truck, and I thought, well, you know, they're either going to put, you know, some kind of chemical in the air or hit me with the ray gun. So I got in gear and I headed south, you know, and next thing I know, they're gone. While they were coming, I tried to talk to other truckers, and they jammed the radios. All our two-way radios were jammed, so nobody could talk to each other. Okay, that's the story in short, okay?
So
I did find out where they were based underground the next day in Jackson, Mississippi. My intelligence officer said, well, if they're coming north, you're going south. Maybe they were based down there. Asked some people, and the very first guys I talked to doing a break, a couple of guys, you know, taking a break near the loading dock, I said, hey, any of you guys seen anything funny flying around in the sky lately? And one guy goes, yeah, I have. I said, what'd you see? They said they got these things looking like UFOs. You know, they come out, and I said, you know where they come from? He said, yeah, they come from the underground base near the airport. These guys were black, they fly them, and I say, how did they get away with it? What did they say it is? And they say it's part of the Drug Enforcement Agency. You know, so I said, oh, well, I'm going to do an interview later tonight on a radio program. Can you draw me a picture of what you see, compare it with mine? And he said, sure. We went into the break room. He drew a picture. I drew one. He did a better job than I did. Okay, so that's the story in short right there.
Wow. So at any point did you want to get out of your truck and engage them, or was it kind of a nerve-wracking?
Well, no, I see, because I was in tune to their you know, because I hung out with this, you know, retired voice and mission control, you know, defense intelligence agent who was now retired and, you know, just doing typesetting, and he was an author, and that's why I was impressed with him, because he did writing, you know, about a lot of esoteric stuff. And so that's why I knew they were going to use, like Warner von Braun said on his deathbed, the head of NASA, he gave a confession to his secretary that in the end, their last wild card will be the phony UFO invasion. So when I saw it, I just knew it was the underground boys now coming out, and I just thought this was it. So so there was no fear. My only thought was, do I have enough fuel to get back to Texas because I don't want to be stuck out here in no man's land. You know, I want to go home.
Totally. So can you tell us a little bit about, your education?
Well, I was smart enough to know I wasn't learning anything in school, so I dropped out in 10th grade and got on with learning. Education, ED, means to remove. Like an editor, he removes. So education doesn't mean learning. It means what they didn't tell you. It's enlightenment that we want. So I was, being manipulated in school. I could feel it. My teachers didn't care about me. And I didn't want to memorize all the parts of an automobile just to know how to get in and drive it. So like, I'm in reference to now English and literary, because I hated English. I hated literary. How did I become a translator and an etymologist when I hated English? Because the way they were teaching us was fraudulent. It's all fraudulent, everything. They don't teach you about the nature of money nor the nature of law. And so it was in the days of the hippies in 1970s, mid 1970s. So I got on I left New Jersey, never looked back, stuck out my thumb and traveled the country and saw how beautiful and big it was. And then ended up in Colorado, living on a ranch and learning how to, ride horses and do that type of stuff on a ranch. And then I lived in cabins, and then from there I went to California for several years and got into construction and became a home builder. And I consider that a metaphor for the building of the work I do today, the construction of words and those things, because I know that my construction days were short-lived in comparison to the other, things of being a political activist, and which was, for the last 30 years now. Although I'm not a political activist anymore, I'm back to being a spiritual pacifist because I know the truth. The truth is, it's bigger than anybody can imagine. I'm going to try to convey that message today, but people cannot begin to imagine how big it is. We may have to do a part 2, Jesse, because ultimately I want to show how they waged the last 3 wars. That Albert Pike wrote in his book Morals and Dogma that there would be 3 world wars in the next century. And turns out to be the next 2 centuries, the 1900s and the 2000s. But how they predicted it, how they wage it, how they finance it, how they make all the propaganda films about it. They run the show. They run the show. And so it's all a stage. That's why they call war theater, And so we're in trouble in our world.
So you've got a lot of information to get out, and I was actually thinking of possibly talking to you about maybe doing a weekly or a monthly just to get this information out because of the way you're shadow banned. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
So have you been involved with the military, or do you get military intel? How do you know about what's going on with the military?
Oh, well, only... Well, when you say know what's going on with the military, I'm doing it from a journalist standpoint. So I used to have friends who are Vietnam veterans, so I know those stories and that type of thing. But the working with a retired intelligence officer was a unique experience. It took me 10 years to figure out. I realized in the end he was probably working both sides. He was probably still one of the boys in retirement. He produced materials for United Truckers and also for Council for the National Interest as a typesetter, so as I learned about, their protocols, a classic story would be where this guy, a former military guy, comes back from China with his Chinese wife, and then he finds out what's going on with the One World Order. It's not new, so it's not the New World Order. It's an old world order, and it's always been here since the recorded history. It's another story for another day. But, when he comes back here, he gets involved with so-called patriots. I've been to those patriot movements and those meetings, and they're all types are there, including the agents. And so this guy gets a good buddy friend in those movements, and it turns out he's an FBI agent. And so 5 years later, he tells him, hey, I can sell you some blueprints. We can get some blueprints of a building, some federal building or whatever. And he was set up by his good buddy, and when he gets the blueprints in a hotel room, he's arrested, goes to prison for 20 years. His wife is left hanging to dry with nobody, in a strange land. And so as my retired intelligence officer friend said at the time, any group bigger than 3 people has been infiltrated. And even though that's not literally true, it is true to the degree that if they see you coming and they consider you a threat, they will infiltrate you.
That makes a lot of sense. So, you know, we have been deceived in every single way. There's deception everywhere, deception on history, deception on, you know, schooling, what's been going on. Do you think that this is a 6,000-year-old death cult like some people believe?
Well, it's a serpent. A serpent cult would be the better way to describe it. And let me just tell. Someone's been trying to reach me. Let's just say on phone, on program. Yeah, there we go. Okay, it's a friend, so I don't want to. They seem to be having an emergency, and I can't talk right now. So, okay, so yeah, it's a serpent cult. In other words, you know, just like we see, they control everything. Jesse, you know, they control religion as well. They control the scriptures. This is part of my bigger interest, you know, to talk about the political and the sensational stuff that they've done, you know, the criminal racket. That's really not what I do. It's more of a political activism thing. But I know it's important to talk about the things that I've learned for other people to benefit from it. But my heart is within the ancient writings and our scriptures and serving the Heavenly Father in what we classically call the kingdom of heaven. But in spite of that, what you know has happened is, in the control of everything, or as it says in Revelations, you know, they have deceived the serpent cult has deceived the entire world. Well, that's quite a deception, right? That means everybody. And so only in an environment like that do certain people wake up. Even those people who think they have woken up have not woken up. They've come to another level of awareness. But the scheme is so fantastic. We're talking about an engineering program that has been going on not for decades, not for hundreds of years, but for several thousand years, actually since the Aryan race came on the scene. And I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to get into that, you know, discussion, because you know, I'm going to wear out and I don't want to, you know, get into too much of that. Well, what I want to do with you, and I would love to do once a week with you, is the Forbidden History Chronicles, and we'll start at the beginning and we'll move forward. That's where we can go. But right now we're at the end of the zone, talking about what we're talking about today. We're at the end of our planet, basically, based on a lot of things, and I'm not going to get into that either today. But that's really where we're at. We're at the end. That's why we got a genocide program going on. Okay.
Do you care talking a little bit about, you know, your family and what had happened with, you know, your family?
Well, you know, that's a personal
okay.
matter. You know.
No problem. There was just a question that was earlier, so I just thought you had any clarity.
No, I appreciate that. But you know, when people wake up, what we see within these our community of people who wake up, one of them wakes up and the other one doesn't, and so it's very tragic because either the gal is left all alone, her husband doesn't care, doesn't get it, or vice versa. The wife wants security, wants to feel good, and can't handle the sensational, you know, narrative of what's going on. So a lot of families break up when only one wakes up.
We hear this over and over. You know, I was just talking to, you know, my friend Jack Talcott yesterday, and, you know, he hasn't even talked to or seen his son in 3 years because of, you know, his awakening to what has gone on. And, you know, he found Jesus, and then he got shipped out of the Postal Service, and, you know, he's been having, you know, a really tough time ever since. So, yeah, it happens to a lot of people who don't wake up together with their family.
Yeah.
So where did you want to get started here today?
Well, I'm gonna. We're here going to talk about 9/11, but I actually have to start because it's good to compare notes, and it's good to, you know, like I always say, I don't want just apples and oranges, but I want apples, oranges, peaches, and pears and plums in order to compare with, because the more we can compare things, the more we can appreciate what has really happened within this what we call the 9/11 scenario. So I want to revisit real quickly, because I lived in Texas and I actually knew some of the Branch Davidians, and so I was pretty close to that story when it happened. I want to talk about that real quick and talk about, for the benefit of those who don't really know what happened, you know, and just give the highlight, which is very low, a low light, and then Oklahoma City. and then get into the main story. You know, so I want to lead into it because I've just it's too important. Because what happens, you know, like we're you know, about what 25 years removed from Waco now or whatever, and how they're teaching it in the history books, I have no idea. But you know, the people that were murdered got blamed for it. You know, the victims got blamed for it, and so so we need to set the record straight, and I can do that in short order here. So I'm good to go.
Perfect. That was David Koresh. They labeled them as religious extremists who had taken their own life, but I believe it was Bill Clinton ordered them to go in and take them out.
Well, Bill Clinton with Janet Reno, the cross-dressing attorney general at the time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get started.
All right. Well, just to clarify, living in Texas, you know, I had the opportunity one day to in a I think they were called the Golden Corral restaurants there in Texas, and I was there having lunch in my town, and it just happened that sitting right next to me was I can't remember now if he was a deputy sheriff or he was a retired investigator, or it may have been both, you know, that type of thing. And so we started talking and find out, you know, he knew, you know, the people at in Waco, and the sheriff. He told me about the sheriff, you know, in particular, because he knew the sheriff. He worked for the sheriff apparently, and you know, the sheriff used to go over there and have dinner with those people. Okay, that there was a totally open environment where there was no threat. There, you know, the sheriff hung out with them. They loved, you know, each other. And so what happened, you know, was a federal takeover of you know, of the jurisdiction within the state of Texas, and you can imagine how befuddled the sheriff must have been. He died a very miserable, unhappy life, you know, as according to the investigator I was talking to, that because they couldn't figure out why are they attacking these people, you know, so they took over. The federal agency took over. And when I said Fed, that means banking. Okay, that's not national United States. You know, it is the nation of the United States no longer exists. It hasn't existed for a long time. Story for another day. But it was the federal banking system that came in, that runs the show in the bankruptcy of America, and took over with the BATF. BATF being an agent of the Federal Reserve banking system, just like the FBI, an agent, unregistered foreign agent of the Federal Reserve banking system. And so, so I just want to mention that because the people that knew the Branch Davidians knew them as decent, innocent, sincere, you know, people, not crazy, willing, you know, as young people are, right? Young people are idealists, and they might want to be hippies, right? Or they might want to, you know, put tattoos all over their body. You know, that people do things when they're young because that's what they do. They do all types of things, and they're not to be condemned for it. It's just, I wouldn't do it. You know, that's not me type of thing, you know, but they were demonized. They were demonized by the media. Who runs the media? Okay, the banking, right? Jewish banking runs the media. And so they demonized the Christians. Even though it might not have been my tradition, they had a right to follow whatever rainbows they wanted to follow, you know. And so, you know, Sun Tzu, he says that if you want to absolutely win a battle, you have to know yourself, and you have to know your enemy. Okay, and if you only want 50% chance of winning a battle, you either have to know yourself or you have to at least know your enemy. And if you want no chance of winning a battle, you've got to know nothing. See, that's the position most people are coming from today when they want to save the world and save America. You know, they're coming from a position of not even knowing their enemy and how the game is played. And so I want to take leave for a few moments. I've got to you know, rest my voice. And so can we do that, and then I'll pick up part two here.
Sure. So you're going to play something for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and bring on the. I've got some music that I put up for people. But, you know, I'm 65 years old, and I used to be able to talk 5 hours straight. I can't do it. So I'm going to just regroup here. So enjoy the music and see some important work that I've been doing at the same time, ladies and gentlemen. And it's all on Amazon. And if you do a Google search for A. Micah Hill, Desert Owl, my full name, all of my books will come up on Amazon. And I want you to see it. It's all spiritually related. Plus, I have 4 dictionaries there that actually reveal the occult nature of the word. So it's all relevant. And so don't go away. I'll be right back. Thank you. Okay, and Jesse, you want me to just jump right back in?
I just wanted to mention that the Desert Owl here has been very, very shadow banned. He's got 25 books on Amazon, which last month not one even sale on the book, in the biggest, book sale, outlet on Earth. They're not trying. They're hoping his information doesn't get out to the masses because it's really pertinent information. So if anybody does like books or does want to support, the Desert Owl here, you can go to Amazon and what would they search for?
Well, if they put in my full name, as we see it on your program, Micah Hill, Desert Owl. If they put it in that way, all 27 books will come up, 4 dictionaries, and the rest are lost writings, translations of sacred scriptures, my proving out that they got us going down a rabbit hole when they wanted us studying Yiddish, Hebrew, or the Greek. Because what I'm presenting within these translations and the dictionaries is what came first. That which is first is superior, that which is first is original, and it's classically known as the Indo-Germanic mother tongue, also known as the original Aramaic. And so I reveal the hidden nature of our modern words where they got us speaking Pig Latin and show how important it is to go back to original thought, because then all of a sudden you start getting pictures, and it's far deeper and far more profound than anything anybody could imagine, what they have not yet been exposed to. So it's right there.
So when I'm talking to someone and someone is, saying words to me and I start seeing pictures in my mind, is that, kind of what, what's happening there when I see a lot? I can see things when people are describing things or telling me a story. I can actually see what they're saying.
Right. Well, we all have different ability to envision things. We're all of a different makeup. But to give you an example of how the words are hiding the original thought, it's the evidence of the manipulation. And because what we're speaking is still the ancient tongue, but in a corrupted form, the pieces are still right in front of us, but we can't read them. Just like the word pine tree really means pin tree, right? Because the pine tree has these sharp little pins, like the spruce, or I can't remember all the different ones specifically, but there's pin trees, and they called now they're pine trees. But like the fir tree is really the fire tree. Why? Because when you go out in the woods and you want to survive and make a fire, the first thing you do is you get the softwood with the turpentine in it, and it starts the fire going, and then you get the heavier oak wood and put it on top of the fire. So fir tree is fire tree. That's what the ancients knew when they went all over the world. Get the fire tree first. And so it's the same with like tyranny. The word tyranny, you can hear it. It's the tear in your eye. Okay, the tear in your eye. It makes you want to cry to see what's going on in our world today, right? And that's tyranny. And so I'm trying to think of something. Treason. You see, the treason comes through the tree's sons. Who are the tree's sons? They are the ones who cut the trees and crafted the ships in order to conquer the world. The Phoenicians, the Celtic, and then our modern day Admiralty state that they gave us, where the ship comes into port. They call it a ship of state, right? And that's the tree's sons. That's the treason. The word craft means treason in Middle English. Craft for Freemasonry. Okay.
Tell lie vision.
Yeah, it's telling lies into your vision.
Okay, so you're definitely good with your etymology. So where are we off to next here?
All right. Well, I've got my cards in front of me, so I can follow a train of thought here. Because I'm on the aluminum and I'm getting old, Jesse. But anyway, people get thinking that it's like some secret going on out there, but there is no secret. Just like there is no conspiracy, it's about slave management. There is no secret because it's all an open secret, and they literally put it right in our face, as you know, with the movies and with their symbolism and with their occultic ways of doing things, their hand sign language, all of it. It's all in our face, and all we have to do is learn how to read. So it's all an open secret. Now, I have this note should have been on the on my other card, so I want to put this over here. Okay, yeah, and so before we get to 9/11, we need to remember a bit of the past and compare notes, and so that's what we're going to do here. Signs and symbols. This was by Confucius. The ancients knew, the ancients knew, and he said signs and symbols rule the world, not words nor law. So we got to be able to read the signs and the symbolism. With that, and that goes then into knowing ancient history, and they cut us off from our past and our true history. So it's a big science. That's why most people will never figure it out, and that's why it is important to present the analysis, like we're doing here today, Jesse, because most people don't have the time, they don't have the the wherewithal, the money to buy the books, or the sophistication to to be a deep study. All of these things are our problem, especially when we've been manipulated and mind controlled all the time. Another quote by Confucius off the top of my head, if I can paraphrase it, is how did that go? It's about words. Dealing with words, that when they manipulate our words, that what happens is then we lose our true science, we lose our true religion, we lose the true elements that were our bedrock, were our foundation, and then as a result, the people are left standing in idleness and despair and confusion, and so to say things correctly, and to know and to be able to convey them through the words, because that's the beginning of everything. Without words, we can't build anything. We can't do anything without words. And so Confucius said that matters is not just important; it matters above everything else that we communicate properly. So we're under the spell, and it's the spell of their spelling. Okay, and so they have an old axiom, right? That he who wins the war controls the history. But how about he who wins the war controls the words, right? And that's really what's a major part of the problem, because they've got us speaking in pig, like I say, pig Latin. If you talk to a foreigner when they come to America and they have to learn English, they'll tell you it's got to be the hardest language to ever learn. And the reason is because it follows none of the laws of original diction, which is one letter, one sound, and I could go on, with that science. But basically, they've done the ultimate spell, put us under a spell, but it's not real, a real supernatural power. It's just the art of trickery. And so once we know the tricks and the name of the game, we can be set free from that, and that's what's beautiful. They don't care, the axiom I have right here on this screen, that they don't care what the answers are, as long as you're asking the wrong questions. And so that's really what it comes down to. That's why they have to control the narrative with the television, with the movies, with all the information. Who doesn't know that once a politician gets in office, everything he said before that was a lie. They kiss our babies and they kiss us off, right? So Ashkenazi, is the original word of this culture. They, in 1775, came up with a new word they fabricated called Jew, but that is not an original term. They actually got it in all of our scriptures. They've got it in all the books, taking it back thousands of years, when literally the word was created in 1775, and it's the same time they added the letter J into our alphabet. The J is a hook. Look at it, it's a fishing hook. They got us on the hook. Then all of a sudden we see the word similar, judicial, judiciary, jewelry, jury, You see, all of these words that they now control, and they control the, you know, all of those elements at the same time, you know. And so the ones who claim to be you know, here's how they change out the scriptures. One little example. In Revelations, it says, there are those who claim to be Jews, but are not Jews. And that is a corruption. That's not what it originally said. It said, there are those who claim to be Israel who are not Israel. Now you know who we're talking about, right? Who claim to be Israel, but are not Israel. Why? Because Israel was dissolved. It was dissolved back in 724 BC. Israel ceased to exist. And those today calling themselves Israel are not Israel. Put two and two together, because they were the ones with the Israeli Mossad who took down the Twin Towers with the Bush cartel. Okay, that's when we get there. We'll show it. So the Jewish banking, these Ashkenazis, and that word Nazi is important because we see it on a culture that headed off World War II. So put two and two together. But you know, they call them banking wars, right? And so the Rothschild family, it's said that they were originally called Bauer, but now I know it's a code. Okay, it was the Jesuits, the Jesuits that wrote Mein Kampf for Hitler, and so you can imagine, you know, that the Jews, the banking Jews, would have wrote a book about hatred for Jews when they're the ones waging the wars, right? But they had to make themselves a scapegoat. And that's what the part of that story of World War II we'll revisit on the next interview, on how these wars are waged against us. But it's the greatest show on earth. And because they control movies and television, right, then they control the narrative, and we can never figure anything out. But it is possible to know. So what I learned about the word Bauer, because I know the code, is, number one, the B and the P are interchangeable, and it's Bauer is power. So the Rothschild family says that they were the Bauers, but it's a code for power, and also the vow of war. Now this connects directly with what we saw in 2001 on 9/11, because it was a war waged against the people. Forget the nation; it's against people, and it was an occult ritual. And so Bauer not only means power, but it means vow war, or the vow of war. And so in order for the Rothschild Bauer family to be in position that they are today, they had to agree to the vow of war, perpetual war against mankind, and that made them the beast system's Vatican agent, which you see in the Catholic Encyclopedia, that the Rothschild family is the protector and defender of the Vatican Trust. They're the ones who print money and control all commerce. There is no money. It's all funny, because they can create all they want. There's no end to it. What they really have harnessed and monetized our system with is our labor through the birth certificate. Story for another day. But anyway, so just like Bauer, this Bauer family means power and the vow for war, perpetual war, or as Montesquieu said in France in the 1700s in his book The Spirit of Law, he said that all wars, he at least knew this part, all wars for the last 2,000 years, but it's really since the beginning of recorded history, all wars for the last 2,000 years have done nothing other than to serve as depopulation programs for one another's nations. Well, when you realize that all the royal families of Europe, whether they're Russian or German or French or Spanish or Portuguese or Dutch, you name it, they're all interrelated. They're all family. And they got us all thinking that we're enemies fighting each other, right? We're the ones who go to the front line and spill our blood. Well, they're just depopulating their program, you know? So it's amazing when you know what's really going on, you know, how this shell game works. So real money is gold. And they took the gold away in 1933 officially. They outlawed gold. It was a fraud because gold is private property. You can't outlaw people owning private property. But they said anybody, the banks, when they took over in the final bankruptcy in 33, or the official big one, then they said that if you don't turn in your gold, you go to prison for 20 years. So the stupid people turned in their gold, but the smart ones, they kept it, you know. So that's what happened. They got all the gold. That's why on the back of the dollar bill, you want to talk about, again, the words, you know, in God we trust. It's really a code. Add the royal secret vowel that they took a vow to, the L, which is a symbol of an obelisk. The L, also a symbol of man. And it's not in God we trust, it's in gold. In gold we trust. It's the secret vowel, the letter L. So the definition for buried alive, which is, let me grab a book here. We have a definition out of Black's Law, first edition. Okay? And so the Black's Law Dictionary comes out of the City of London. So it's a Jewish banking book. And so just like the King James Version came out of the City of London, Jewish banking, and they gave it to King James, who was the founder of International Freemasonry. And, you know, so that's when they put the word Lucifer in there, by the way, and Lucifer means the true cipher. So when I'm revealing these codes, realize that Lucifer means true cipher. That's all it is. It's an idea. It's like a corporation. It took a life of its own, and it won't die because they won't die to their cause. So they keep this alive. But Lucifer was never, the word Lucifer was never in our scriptures. So when we look up in the first edition of Black's Law, Black Law for Black Law, right? What part of black don't we get? When you look under burying alive or buried alive, it says in English law, the ancient punishments of sodomites and those who contracted or contacted with the Jews. Okay? So didn't the people at 9/11 get buried alive? I think so. And they buried us all alive because they made us the walking dead, because they killed us with the birth certificate legally through Roman civil law, because a birth certificate is a Roman slave document. And when a slave baby was born in Rome, they impressed their feet upon a certificate. Before its feet ever touched the ground, it was made a slave forever. And that's what they did to most all of us here. And they even cut our foreskins off. If we're males, they even committed an occult ritual on us and circumcised us without our family's permission. An occult ritual. How do you like that? I didn't give them permission to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's mutilation.
Sure. And then there's this supposed argument, well, you know, it's done for health reasons. No, as Yeshua has clearly said, if it were required for health reasons, it never would have been there in the first place, you know, so that's just a ruse. So what the bankers did in 33, when they were going to now come out of the box, you know, with the New Deal, Roosevelt brought the New Deal. It's all the New Deal, the better deal. Wait a minute, isn't it just like the old deal? It's another deal, just like the other deal? Well, you know, they're calling it the New Deal anyway. And the good times are going to roll. We had the Depression. The bankers choked us with the 20s and the Depression, people jumping out of windows, and it's another shell game. But now we're going to take over through the bankruptcy in 1933, and they created the War and Emergency Powers Act. And Dr. Eugene Schroeder of the agricultural movement discovered this. And basically what it is, they declared us the enemy. And so what part of being declared the enemy then don't we get? And this is why I bring it on today, you know, as a foundational point within this interview, because these are the things that were discovered by our great researchers, and now nobody talks about them anymore. What part of being the enemy don't we get when they want to commit genocide on our planet, right? So we're the enemy. Why are we the enemy? Because if everybody knew the truth, they'd be in trouble, right? They'd be in trouble. And so red, white, and blue, you know, we get excited here in America about the red, white, and blue, you know, get sentimental and jerk a tear. But wait a minute, the French flag is red, white, and blue. The British flag is red, white, and blue. The Russian flag is red, white, and blue. And I think our flag is red, white, and black and blue, you know? So what part of red, white, and blue don't we get? Maybe there's something behind the symbolism, as Confucius said, you know? And so the red stands for Jewish communism. It's the blood that they spilled by their perpetual war, their vow to war on mankind perpetually. The white is for the stars because they consider them stars, and that's what we see in the Khazarian media in Hollywood, right? They got the walking stars of fame. Of an actor, you become a star, or if you're a good musician, you become a star, right? So they're all talking about becoming a star, you know. And so the blue is for the Aryanism, because the Ashkenazi are Khazarian. Khazarian means the Aryans with the keys. That's what they're doing, right? They're holding the keys to everything, just like the Vatican. Behind them, you see the cross keys, right? It's about the keys of knowledge, the keys that unlock everything for us, what they hid from us when they wanted to educate us by taking away the things that would be most important to know about, you know. Controlling it, have to control education, or yeah, what should have been enlightenment. So now with the bankruptcy, we see that the judge, wearing a black robe, he's in a religious ritual. He is sitting on the bench, and bench is Latin for bank. So now we see that the judge in the military judicial system in America, as well would be in Canada and all, you know, virtually all the world, he's sitting on the bank for the bankers. And it's all about money, because when they get you in prison, you know, they know you're innocent, they're going to put you in prison anyway, because they get the birth certificate on Wall Street, and you're now making money for the bank. Okay, it's the greatest shell game on earth. We're being traded as commodities on an international market based on our labor. And so we hear people talking about and realize that this is all preliminary, you know, to talking about what I'm about to talk about next, which is coming up right now in about a minute. That we have to know the enemy. That's what I said, what, you know, Sun Tzu said. We have to know the nature of the enemy and how they operate, because people they know there's a problem, but they don't know who's doing it, what's going on here, you know, and they're all confused. And it's real simple. It's who controls media, who controls the money, who controls the entertainment, who controls the music, who controls the internet. Bill Gates' father owns one of the 12 branches of the Federal Reserve Bank in the northwest of the U.S. You know, Bill Gates, his father, not having just the Federal Reserve Bank, but also in control of Planned Parenthood. Get the picture? And then we got Bill Gates, just another front, right? Controlling the internet, but he wasn't smart enough to build that internet. He's just a front man. Let's see it for what it is, for what he's doing right now by being the front man, right?
50 grand his dad paid for Microsoft.
Okay, yeah, right. And with an illusion. He bought it with an illusion, of course, right?
Yeah.
As well, paid illusion.
The fake $50,000 money.
Yeah. So people are confused. You know, they're saying, well, we're not a nation, we're a federation. You know, they get confused with these terms. But look at who the federation is. It's the Federal Reserve Bank. And so it's a world federation. We had a national government, at least an illusion of one, but the federation is the world. And so Fed is the first part of it is Fae, and Fae is their woman. Fae is their goddess. We also know her as Columbia. That's why it was called the District of Columbia, because Columbia is looking pretty good, right? She's looking good on Columbia Records and Columbia Pictures, holding the torch of the ancient Aryan race. You see, Deutsch is originally Teutsch, and because it's not German. German means Kaiser, but Deutsch is really a cover for the word Teutsch, which is the word torch, and that's why we see the runner in the Olympics always running with the torch, passing it on, because it's symbolic of them being an ancient cult, serpent cult, passing the torch on to the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. So it's a world federation. It's a one world order. Nothing new about it. It has always existed since the Aryan race came on the scene. It goes back to that story of the Fallen Watchers. They convinced everybody it was some invisible creature with wings on their back, when it was an Aryan race that mated with the redhead spotted Celtic race, the fallen ones with the stain of blood, the children of Cain. Story for another day, but that's where it begins, because they set up the priesthoods. The Aryan class did, called Brahmin today. Brahmin is a corruption of the word sovereign. Makes sense, because they are the sovereigns on the earth, running the show, because the Father gave us free will. People are confused. They think, well, you know, God wouldn't, whatever they mean by the word God, wouldn't let them get away with this. Well, he gave man free will. We can make a choice. And so we can also make the choice to support beast or not to support the beast. because once a beast, always a beast, and you think you're going to fix the beast, you got another thing coming, because you really don't know how big the beast really is. It's a Leviathan, and it eats everything in front of it. So we have World Federation. So Soviet Union, remember, it dissolved. Boy, isn't that interesting how that happened with Gorbachev at the time. But Soviet means world. So we don't ever get the picture, but Soviet Union means a world union. So just like United States, remember, it's a double-headed eagle, right? The East and the West. So United States we think it means the 50 states, but it doesn't. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the United States of the world. United how? Against us, against the people. United nations, right? Imaginations. That's all it is. It's plantations. It's the cattle on free-range chickens. You know, that's all we are. So what they ultimately have done in this grandiose scheme, when there is no money and it's all based on illusion, I could take you back to the story of the Titanic. I used to interview Bill Hughes, and who wrote the book The Secret Terrorists, and he tells the story how they built the Titanic to sink it. They gave free passes to all of the wealthy of America who would be in opposition to a communist Jewish centralized bank, and they got free tickets to ride back to America, you know, on the unsinkable ship. And so, you know, many of the wealthy of America got on that ship, and they went down with it, because they had to get rid of these wealthy that would have been in opposition to a centralized bank, and so they were done with them. That was then the Federal Reserve Act was written about a year later at Jekyll Island, and then by 1933 the thing is full blown in our face. And so but not only did they build a Titanic, the biggest ship ever written, you know, ever built at the time, but they also built the Twin Towers, both to take them down. You see, so that's how I want people to compare apples and oranges, because they did it before and they did it again. But with this one, you know, in Technicolor, state of the art, 2001, it was a symbolic new age that they ushered in. And so it was bigger than the Titanic, you know, and we saw it all in Technicolor. And so we're going to go there. And so that's my initial introduction on how the enemy operates. And now we're on part 2 in Waco. And so I think with part 2, I want to take another spell here, okay? And because I know how to pace myself, and so we're going to share another musical round with you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be right back with part 2. And I've got this worked out with 4 parts here. And so you're not going to want to go anywhere. Just, you got time to call a friend right now. And I'll be right back with more of what they didn't want you to know, but we tell right here. And that's, of course, thank you to Jesse on The Missing Link.
Thanks, brother.
Way to go, Jesse. Be right back. Okay, welcome back. Jesse, you want to jump in real quick, or you want me to keep on rolling here? Okay, got a delay.
I have my mic mute. I just mute my mic so that way nobody hears me crunching on my grapes. I just wanted to ask about, the Bible, the etymology of the word, where you believe it was originated, how it's kind of changed over time, because some believe it's BS, some believe it's, the word of God, some people believe that, it's already happened, that Revelations was, like the preterist version, that it's done in history. So what's your thoughts on the Bible?
Well, the word, I thought you were asking me about the word itself. So I'll just point out that because Bible does not mean book, it is a code. And so Bible, you can see the first part is the word. It's actually several words in different ways of reading it, but bib el. So we see it's a bib, and we know what the baby gets a bib or covering. And so it's the bib el, and the bib el, the L is an abbreviation for the enlightened ones. So the Bible, the bib el, is the covering for the enlightened ones. And what does that give an example, Desert? Okay, so the question was asked one day, well, who are the Illuminatis? Who are they, and how do we see them? Are they politicians? Are they judges? Or are they football players? Or who are they? And the answer was no, none of those. The Illuminati are the Schulers, the Pat Robertsons. All of they hide behind religion. as they have from the beginning of time, the priesthood. And so that's why the narrative, that we have in our scriptures has been corrupted, because they made it their code book with the Jewish banking, King James, Scottish Rite, founder of Freemasonry, Vatican agent, because Freemasons are Vatican agents, even though he made himself out to be a Protestant. Not true. It was all a shell game. And the guy that wanted to blow up, the Parliament and all that, he was a patsy. What don't we know about patsies? They're a dime a dozen, right? They set them up. It's the ever flipping coin. You never know which way it's going to land. So the word correct. So El Bib, there's different ways of reading it. Off the top of my head, I got to look at it, so I won't go there. But to answer your question, first of all, the word for Bible should be shulfar. Shulfar is the same word for ram's horn, for scribe. It means knowledge from afar. That's what it means, shulfar, knowledge from afar. And but as far as the book, it's a remnant of what we had. We had a library in Caesarea, Syria, and Eusebius was the last librarian. Then he was ordered by Constantine, the great terrorist, to bring the library over there to Turkey and Constantinople, and so he did. And so we were robbed of a library. What we have left in our 27 teeny-weeny little books is a remnant. Who wrote the Bible, the translation of the Bible? James Murdoch, or was it Moffat? I think it was James Moffat. I get confused between the two. In 1922, thereabouts, in a speech, said, of all the religions of the world, of all that have literature, of all the religions of the world, the people who follow Christianity, or what they call the Bible, but specifically the New Testament, have for them what is ultimately the smallest collection of writings for any religious tradition. And how can that be? When Yeshua is the one who made the universe, right? It's his story. And he comes to the center of the earth, the navel of the earth, called Yeru Shalom, Jerusalem. And it's about his creation. And what he does is presents the greatest philosophy for life and truth and meaning that has ever been. And yet it becomes the smallest story, the smallest collection. And that's the evidence of that it's all being controlled. You see, that's what my ministry has been about for over 40 years now. I've been studying for 50, since age 14, ancient history. And so people, they cannot process. You see, they're convinced because God is so powerful, God is so strong, whenever that word God means to them, because I don't use it. I go back to the original, what they stole from us. The great, the Yahweh Hey, who is the great Zulav Hain. Now that's a mouthful, and it has meaning. That's what we can talk about someday in the future. But so our scriptures are under the control of the so-called enlightened ones. They're the Gnostics. They use the Gnostic term to beat up the authors of the Nag Hammadi library. They never call themselves Gnostic, and they're not. And it's not a bad word. Gnostic means knowledge. Catholics are agnostic. That means they're against knowledge. So everything's confusion. Nobody can make sense out of anything because confusion is their game. Jesse, right?
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that.
All
And
right.
we'll have to go far. We'll go deeper again in different shows, because
Yeah.
knowledge is key, and you've got a lot that I want to help bring out to the world.
Yeah. Well, I've been preparing and chomping at the bit for a long time to, have someone that could. And I know you just really started not too long ago. You're really just out the gate, and you're looking like $1 million. I'm just so honored to be on your program network, and you're trying to do everything you can to make it a better world. And I've been at this a long time. I've been started as a political activist 30 years ago, and I'm worn out. I'm tired of it. I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? I'm ready to go. So anyway, so Waco happens in 1993. And I was now a political activist. I had my first organization, and I'm doing research, meeting the people, met people from Branch Davidians and all that, and researchers and investigative journalists and all that, and I was, making connections. And so the day that they decided to take them down was April 19th. So look at the number, right? 911, April 19th. And April 19th, 1993, when they Delta Force took tanks and they started poking holes in the building of, they called it a compound, but it was actually a home and a church, if we can use that word. That's another occultic word, but we can use it. A home and a church of men, women, and children, 100 of them, and they took military tanks against Posse Comitatus, which meant that no U.S. military could ever be used against U.S. civilians. They lied again, and then what they were doing was spraying gas with the tanks, with the aerosol injection nozzle into the building, so that it would become highly toxic and flammable. And at the same time, a gentleman who created a unique technology called FLARE his technology was being utilized in an airplane at 10,000 feet, filming everything that was going on with the tanks. And what the military did, they set up 5 machine gun nests, totally surrounding the Branch Davidian home and church. And so when the tank was poking in the holes and spraying the gas, people were trying to run out of the doors to escape. And so the Delta Force, notice the Delta Force like the Delta variant, right? Delta. It's another thing to talk about one day. It's a code for darkness, right? D for death, destruction, right? So when you look down from 10,000 feet with the FLARE film, you can literally see the guys behind the tanks with the machine guns, and you can see the fire coming out of the machine guns, strafing, and literally out of every back door that was available, because they crushed the front door, so they couldn't come out where the TV cameras were. They had to go out the back, and every door that they tried to exit from, they were murdered at the door with machine guns, and the rest of them that didn't go out because of that burned alive. Burned alive. One guy was able to crawl out the front, but that was about it. And so that's what they did on April 19th, the occult high day, because the 19th is the occult high day for these people. One of them. June 24th is another one. Halloween is another one. Let's not forget the Saturnalia at the end of the year, what we call Christmas, when they've murdered more people throughout history than any other period of time. So the occult day, Hitler's birthday is on the 19th. He was a bastard child of the Rothschilds. Was it true? I don't know. But they say it's the 19th of April. April Fools, I guess, is part of that too, huh? And then Lexington and Concord, when the shot fired around the world, when the word Jew came into existence, 1775, when in Lexington, Concord, the shots were fired and by the redcoats against the Americans on the soil, and Crispus Attucks, a black patriot, was killed. The shot fired around the world April 19th, and the Warsaw Ghetto burned 1933. Warsaw Ghetto burned by Nazi Germany, which housed the Jews to make them look like the victims. A good ploy when the Jewish bankers are running everything, waging the war, then to make themselves look like the victims of the war. And then we could talk about Columbine. Columbine would have been on the 19th, but 19 was a Sunday, so Columbine, that mass shooting in the school in Colorado, Columbine, Colorado, was on the 20th. So what we see is this pattern of 19, 19, 19, which is just a spin on the 9/11. The Roman numeral for 9/11 is IXXI. And it's clearly evident in the Roman numeral that you've got the, the apron, the Masonic apron, and the compass and the square and all that are right in the middle of that configuration. A lot of it is seen in Switzerland, which is the banking headquarters. And note that it's very interesting that Hitler never attacked Switzerland. Okay, that's a clue. So anyway, so the tanks, while they're blowing into the building, they're saying, "This is not an assault. This is not an assault." Can you imagine a husband beating his wife, punching her face in, saying, "Honey, I'm only loving you"? You know, that's basically what they were doing. They're saying, "This is not an assault. This is not an assault." They're lying, right? Who doesn't know that what they did to them was terrorism, was genocide, right? On a religious group, a passive religious group that never shot, hurt, or threatened anyone, and used to have the sheriff come in for dinner, you know. And so, so then on the same day of April 19th, get this. This is a footnote that I'm the only one who's ever mentioned that got it, because I'm paying attention. But on the same day, while the ashes of Waco are smoldering, while there's 100 dead bodies of men, women, and children, and by the way, Delta Force went into the building and put an explosive device on the main strategic bunker. They had a concrete bunker for storing food and stuff, and they put explosives right on the top. They snuck in while the tanks are blowing holes. They put charges right on top of that where the women and the children were, and that exploded at the same time when the fire went off. You know, so they literally made sure that everyone died. Everyone died in that episode, so that nobody could tell the same story about how they were victimized. You know, they got to silence them. And so on the same day when the smoke of Waco, Texas is smoldering and men, women, and children were massacred, just like the Native Americans were massacred repeatedly by the United States government. What part of a massacre don't we get? If they would do it to them, why wouldn't they do it to us, right? When you think about it, how stupid we really are. You know, we think it's God's country. Again, who is God? That's got to be the Pope, you know, because they've been doing it all along. And we call it our country. Isn't it great? Red, white, and blue. Aren't we better than everybody else? Oh, this is God's country. Come on, you know. Freedom, bro. Freedom. So on the same day, when we have 100 men, women, and children smoldering, bleeding to death, we have Bill Clinton in Washington, D.C. at a special memorial dedication. And in the crowd are all of the Jewish society. And what Bill Clinton is dedicating to this Jewish society is a Holocaust Museum memorial, where when Bill Clinton is giving his speech, says, this, talking about Holocaust, will never happen to you again. Want to talk about symbolism? That's quite a bit of symbolism.
Wow.
You see? If you can read the picture, it means you're gonna never have to do a phony kill your own brothers and sisters to make yourself look like the victims, because now we're gonna do it to the Christians. And that's what Albert Pike said in the book Morals and Dogma, with their Third World Wars and the Last World War, that they would wage on us. They would kill all the Christians, and they'd use every means, including Islam, to do it. You know? So, yeah, the truth is stranger than fiction, ladies and gentlemen. And so that's part 2. I can go right into part 3. I'm doing good. And
do you see the picture I have up?
You have a picture up?
Yeah.
Let me minimize here. Okay, and
while you were talking about Waco, I just brought up a picture of the building.
Oh yeah. And Carl Klang did a beautiful song called 17 Little Children. I thought about it too late. I thought I should have grabbed that and played it, you know, because it's such a profound song, you know. Maybe you can find it.Maybe you'll be able, if you did a search on YouTube for 17 Little Children by Carl Klang, K-L-A-N-G, you'd find it, and you know, we can bring it in if you want to. So, but I'll get back to the presentation in the meantime.
Okay.
So let me go back to our graphic. And I'm learning this technology with Jesse for the first time today, ladies and gentlemen. So hang in there. It's working. Okay, apparently it's working. So Oklahoma City, Murrow Building, another one. You know, this is when I was still green behind the ears. You know, I was a greenhorn, you know, into this political stuff, because I was always introverted and had no interest in politics. I never voted, okay? I always knew they were liars. Why would I want to vote for a liar, So I had nothing to do with any of this. But when I saw they were coming for my family, I said, wait a minute. I got to get involved, And so that was my motivation, because I knew this was real, that these people were psychopaths and they had it in for us. They're liars and they're partying on us. What do you mean by political party? Let's have a party, right? Let the good times roll for us. We're going to come and get them. So let me just take a sip of my drink here.
What's the search 17 Little Children?
17 Little Children by Carl Klang. K-L-A-N-G. Carl with a C. 17 Little Children. It should be up there. Maybe it's not anymore, but he was a musical genius. So in Oklahoma City, what's interesting is just like with the Titanic, there was a book written about the sinking of the Titan about 4 years before the Titanic set sail. So they write a book with the script in it, right? And people buy the book and think it's, a piece of fiction, and it's really the blueprint for sinking the Titanic. So it's all an open secret. There is no secret. They're telling you what they do. And so the same with Oklahoma City, that the governor's brother, apparently, if I remember the story correctly, the governor of Oklahoma, his brother writes a book about the blowing up of a federal building in Oklahoma City. And of all things, the guy who actually does the bombing is called McVeigh in the book. And then we've got a real life story, and who is more than a patsy. He's not a patsy. He's a secret military operative. He's special forces. He wanted to be special forces. They said, okay, you're going to resign and you're going to be working covertly for us in the civilian sector. And that's what McVeigh was. So the bottom line in this story is, there was no truck that blew up in front of the Murrow building. It was proven by an ex-military guy, a colonel of some sorts. I can't remember his name now. But he pointed out that they tied charges onto the columns of the building, the federal Murrow building, because this was an inside explosion that blew out, and there was never a crater outside where supposedly the truck was parked, but it wasn't. It was driven away, but they create the narrative since they control the pictures, right? But that's why they had to evacuate the building at one point. They said, there's more charges. So everybody runs out. Then the news media were told, don't you mention that again. They're doing the live program, and they're told on the side, because, we learned that later. They were told, don't talk about that again. So they never talked about the charges in the building. But what it shows you is that they're willing to kill their own. Because in the nursery, were the children of the people that worked in the federal building, you see, and so a book was written about it, So McVeigh, he is just part of the script, and what happens? He gets arrested, but he's still a military operative. They say, "Don't worry, Tim. When you get out of here, when they do the injection, we're gonna give you new life, okay?" And so literally when he's on the gurney getting the lethal injection, one of the reporters said, and I think they may have done it on purpose because they want to give everybody else a high sign, that like Hitler, do your dirty work, but in the end, we'll use a dummy and burn his body up so nobody can identify it, but you go to South America through the Vatican Underground, So the same with McVeigh. They say, you do this for us and we'll get you out at the end, don't worry about it. And so this woman reporter, when she's supposedly witnessing the lethal injection, says, I never knew when you die, you still breathe. So he was still breathing on the gurney when they, gave him the injection and they rolled him away. So that was the lady, whether she said it sincerely or it was to let other people know the high sign. You work for us and we'll get you out the back door. Don't worry about it. But that's what happened. So McVeigh, I'm convinced, is alive and well today. And it's just an amazing psychopathic world we have, ladies and gentlemen. It's a science. Like I really wanted to go here. Like I really wanted to become a political activist where, I'm now a targeted individual myself because I know too much. You know?
Same with me. Like, this is obviously not what I would think that I would be doing on this earth, but it's just a necessity that came and evolved through what I feel is right to bring this information to people. But this is not what I want to be doing. This is not what I've envisioned about being here on earth. It's supposed to be heaven, but for some reason these psychopaths make it like a hell.
Right, and it's only because we care about family, we've got conscience, we break the mold. And so therefore we attempt to do the right thing at all costs and against all the odds. I had to learn how big it was. I was stupid and naive, introverted, and I had to get on, start doing radio interviews talking about the stuff I was learning. I was willing to do that, and then ultimately one day I'm offered a radio program by Marinette Broadcasting out of Florida going on satellite and syndicated on different AM and FM stations, and it was out of necessity. It wasn't what I wanted to do, and so I had to really, being an introvert, imagine how hard it was for me to have to want to talk. But I had something to talk about. If you got something that's important, you forget about yourself. You forget because it's about family. It's about what's right. And I just didn't know how the game was played. Now I do, and so it's far bigger than anybody out there can imagine. I got to say it and emphasize it. It's so far bigger because they've been doing it for hundreds and thousands of years, and they own all institutions, and they always control both sides. They're the good guy, they're the bad guy. They're the Democrat, they're the Republican. They control all sides because that's how the game is played. They will infiltrate your good side, and then so that's why to know the nature of the beast, to know about the secret societies. The Freemasons were at every single public meeting I went to. They even were happy to show their Switzerland identification card or their ring, and I didn't know enough about them at the time to tell everybody, hey, stay away from that guy, but we knew there was something about them. We knew, but we didn't have, none of us were studied in, the occult Freemasonry, which is based on Jewish Kabbalism, which is controlled by banking, and the Jesuits, the Jewish front, the war-making front. So we're in our number 4. And I'll tell you what, since this is the big one now, I'm going to do one more break, if you forgive me, and I will...
Sure, I also have that video for us to play for that at any time as well.
Wait a minute, you mean the Carl Klang song?
Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah.
You want to play it, Jesse?
If you want me to, it's, you're guiding the ship here.
Right. Well, no, it's appropriate because we just finished Waco, so this is really good to for everybody to hear the words. Listen to these words, ladies and gentlemen, and let your hearts go to these people.
Just in case you don't remember, let me jog your memory. In a church they called the Waco Compound, back in April '93, 17 little children, all so helpless and so small, died a senseless death of gas and flames. How many names can you recall? 17 little children. Don't it make you wonder why? 17 little children, how could they deserve to die? Maybe we should stop and ask ourselves, have we become so blind? Well, 17 little children, finally open up your mind. How Did you sleep last night, Bill Clinton? Tell me, did you feel their pain? As 17 little children cried out and perished in the flames. Attorney General Janet Reno, I accept your offer to resign. How can you stand for law and order now, when you won't answer to your crimes? 17 little children, all so helpless and so small. 17 little children, how many names can you recall? Maybe we should stop and ask ourselves, have we become so blind? Will 17 little children finally open up your mind? I've heard it said the Branch Davidians only got what they deserved, yet no one seems to know what laws were broken, what was in the warrant they never served. Yesterday I sold my TV set, stopped my subscription to the Times. To me it's plain to see the media was an accomplice to these crimes. 17 little children, don't it make you wonder why? 17 little children, how could they deserve to die? Maybe we should stop and ask ourselves, have we become so blind? Will 17 little children finally open up your mind? Open up your mind.
Open up your mind. That guy, Carl Klein, he produced several albums of long-playing ballads. He's worth checking out if you can find his audios on the internet. Support a guy that suffers from depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what makes him a genius, you know. And I couldn't stop crying, you know, during this presentation. Thank you for doing that, Jesse, because it really puts a feel for it, you know. Really puts it into a perspective. And now we're going to talk about 3,000 children, because they're all children of the Spirit of Life, all men and women that wanted to live and to blossom and to have families and to grow, and they were denied it by a culture. I saw that lady put up that last comment there. She said the sick culture, and you know that's what happens, you know, when you take the blood oaths and you subscribe to a secret society that gives you all the perks and privileges that anybody could ever imagine. You can get away with murder, you know, you get all the free food you want, all the sex and entertainment and drugs. You know, they're the ones who are dealing the drugs, you know. And so this is where I'm saying that people have no idea how the game is really played. That it's a criminal. In other words, to put a little bit of picture on it before I get into the remaining presentation here. The first what do they call them back then? The gangsters, the mafia in America, right, in Chicago, back in the 1800s. Sir?
Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky.
Yeah, Al Capone and all of them. They in the 1800s, the very first mafia in America were called the Young Turks, and they're all were Jewish. They were Jewish. They get away with murder because they're protected by the organization. But at one point, when I guess we ought to call the head of the FBI, Hoover, right? We ought to call him Lucky Louie because he got to be a 40-year, in the FBI, 40 years working for the banksters. So at one point, Al Capone and the others become a liability, and so it makes them look good to arrest all of them. But they're buddies. They're all family. That's the Bauer family, the vow for war. And so isn't it interesting that today there's actually because, Turks, when you use the word Turks, that means Khazarian. That's talking about Eastern, Central Europe, right there at the crossroads from Western Europe into Eastern Asia. And and there's a place there called Nicomedia, right south east of Constantinople. And Nicomedia means the secret media. And why would they have been there? Because that was the ending point of the Silk Road. It was the crossroads from the east into the western part of the world, which is Europe. And so being a crossroads, it had to be an intelligentsia point of gathering information, of controlling factions, of spreading and gathering information worldwide, continent-wide. And so what do you see in the middle of Nicomedia? You get the word comedy. Well, isn't that what the Jewish media also bring us, the Khazars? They bring us the comedy, right? Cheers and Seinfeld, Laurel and Hardy, the Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers. I like that one, for Karl Marx. So they're the ones who are entertaining us. They're making us laugh every Saturday on Saturday Night Live, and we don't know that the very people that are making us laugh are the ones who are now making us cry. They control it all.
What about the Young Turks, that Cenk Unger?
Right, that modern-day so-called patriot reporting news agency, right?
Yeah, but it seems like it's another just democratic, front.
No, really, because when I first listened to them, they were putting down constitutional principles, even though the Constitution's a rag, But what I really picked up on real quick was their dialogue. And these Young Turks, because they're playing it off of the mafia that we had in the 1800s. That also, if you know what the Turks are, they are Khazars. And so you can tell by what they say that they are the enemy. They're trying to control another version of the narrative. So yeah, and it's really a deep science, and one really has to know. Really, what it really comes down to is knowing all issues. Just like when I had United Truckers defending the Constitution, my second organization. While I had that organization, that's when I discovered the Constitution was irrelevant. It was a rag. It was a ploy. It was a means to an end. It was a document. If you take the last letter off of Constitution, you get Constitutio. A Constitutio is an imperial decree that comes down. So it's a Roman imperial decree. And as someone said it well, I can't remember who said it, but after the reorganization after the Civil War, when they took away the missing 13th Amendment, which was about titles of nobility, then no corporation, no attorney, no one that gets any foreign gift or emolument or pension of any sort from any foreign power could ever be an American, right? Because he's a foreign agent. Then they replaced it with the 13th Amendment about slavery. The 14th Amendment came right after the Civil War, and it was the first one that had 2 subclauses. And then after that, each amendment continued to have a subclause saying, and any other further legislation that is required to meet these ends. Meaning it's an open door. And so what the Constitution, the bill, these additional items into the Bill of Rights became the second Constitution. I mean, come on, if the Constitution, if the Bill of Rights were about rights, why would the 19th Amendment tell you that you have no longer the right to drink alcohol? Think about it, right? 19th Amendment, no longer you're allowed to drink, slave, so they could have another wave of you know, the make money again, just like the Bush family, the father of, you know, George Bush Sr., you know, he made his big fortune in smuggling alcohol from Canada into America through the, you know, the Great Lakes, you know, and all of that. So it's just a shell game. It's a bunch of criminals having a party on all of us, and we're the expendable fodder, you know, and that's what the 3,000 people in the Twin Towers were. They were just fodder for their ritual, their cult ritual of a blood sacrifice to usher in a new age, all to serve who? An idea. That's all. It's an idea, because darkness, there's nothing there. It's an illusion. It's empty. And that's what they are. They're empty souls committing crimes against mankind because they are of the sensual world, the lower world of let's have a party now, because they convinced themselves that there is no retribution, that there is no life after death. That's what they've convinced themselves of. You know, because if they knew what was coming to them by the great Father of Light that made us all, they'd be shaking in their boots right now, because they have waged war against the Father of Light. They have waged war against his offspring, against his creation, and they are now even destroying the world with all their aerosol spraying and burning up the forest. They're taking down the world total. It's over. It will take, as Dane Wigington on his channel says, with geoengineeringwatch.org, that it will take 20 million years to bring back the ozone layer and the sea plankton that brings forth the oxygen, because they have burned down all the forests and they're almost done doing it. So that's a story for another day again. But I just wanted to add that footnote. I want people to see it's not about, you know, them coming to do this or that to you. The world is going down. They've destroyed it. They have to take everyone down in a genocide program because they can no longer grow food because of the UVC and UVB radiation coming through. After UVC, you get X-ray. It's over. The trees are dying. The plants are dying. And it's killing us. And so that's a story for another day, but it explains everything else that they're doing. It's the core issue. The world is being taken down by these psychopaths. They are committing suicide on everything, on all of us. Because they're order takers. They're not the head. They are the tail. They are the puppy dogs. That's what dog means. It's God backwards as dog, because God is the Pope, and the dogs are the priests and the Freemasons that do the bidding of their master. They don't know what they're doing. It's only a good party, the right party, the left party, this party, that party. As long as they can party, that's all they care about. Feel important. Give me a gun and a jackboot, and I'll feel pretty proud. That's all right. Forgive me for the rant, okay? You know, I've been doing this too long.
No, it's this. We love the passion. You know, there's nothing to be forgiven. Thanks for sharing that with us.
All right. So we were talking about the tower. 9/11. Here we are, the anniversary. A week ago, I never saw this interview coming. You know, I'm overwhelmed that you provided the opportunity, and it was the right time and the right moment for everything that's going on in our world. You know. So here we are in part 4. National Geographic came out with the ultimate propaganda film. After Jesse told me he wanted to bring me on here today, I realized I had to do, you know, a little bit of refreshing, and it just so happened that National Geographic came out with their 20th anniversary propaganda film, and so I sat back and watched it. It was about, I don't know, 5 hours long or something, and it was all propaganda. You know, where did the truth go? You know, and so today is the real story behind what happened. And you know, I only wanted to know the truth, and I watched every clip that was out there for over a decade, for probably 12 or 15 years. I don't watch that stuff anymore. I haven't watched it in 5 or 6 years, you know, because I already know the answers. I know how the game is played, and I know what they did, and I know who did it. And so, so we've got many false narratives that still prevail on 9/11, and so we're going to set the record straight right now. And it's especially for the young people. I think many of the older ones get it. Only on the big one, you know, the third truth that I'm going to bring on, that Dmitry Kozlov, you know, I'm coining the term that he made, you know, for the third truth, because I'm giving him credit for bringing out the truth. I have a saying now that, you know, there was a lady I interviewed and used to talk to on the side named Judy Wood. And Judy, a great lady, some type of physicist dealing with structures. And let me take a sip here. She was trying to suggest that all the anomalies that we saw after the towers came down were some type of secret technology. And she gave her reasons for it. But, you know, so I now have a saying that, you know, Judy Wood asked all the right questions, and she pointed out all the anomalies. But it was Dmitry Kozlov who got the story right. And he's got a 5-hour interview. If you know, want to go look for him later on after the program, it's a 5-hour presentation. And you can't ask for a better presentation on what really happened. So if you want to confirm what I'm sharing with you, I know it's true. And therefore I can give you the thumbnail, you know, of what happened. But basically, he was at the right place at the right time, like so many other people of conscience, and he told the true story about how they were taken down, and that's what we're going to do right now. So there are many false narratives that prevail in 9/11, but there's only one truth, and it's called the third truth, because there are what people are doing is they're theorizing, right? But theory is not science. Theory is speculation. It's hypothesis. It's, you know, it's almost there, but it's not quite there. Not sure, you know. And so, but it is possible to know. It is possible to know, but you have to see enough evidence put on the table, and that's what Dmitry did. And so I'm amazed today when I always talk to people. They're looking at what was put there to create the illusion. To create the illusion, okay. And so we're going to point out the illusions. And but first, I want to point out the occultic end of it, because 9/11, we see a 9 and we see 2 1s. Isn't it interesting that the 2 1s look like the 2 columns, right? And so what does 9 mean? You know, if we're talking about symbolism, we got a 9, and then we go to 11. Wait a minute, what happened to 10? You know, and so we'll get there. What happened to 10? But 9 is a symbol. Notice that now 6, because we're talking symbolism, if you look at a 6, you can see that it's the symbol of the Fibonacci cycle, that it's opening up, unfolding. Can you see that, Jess? I'm just in your mind that 6 is the number of creation, and therefore its imagery is that of an unfolding snail or a circle that winds out like the Fibonacci code. You know what I'm talking about?
Of course, the Fibonacci sequence. Yeah, that's kind of the flower of life.
Right. And so they also say that number 6 is the number of creation, right? It's the number of man. Number of man. So 6, everything made in 6 periods, not 6 24-hour periods. It was longer, like 6 billion years. You see the story for another day. I can talk about that. But 6 is the number of creation. So if 6 is the number of creation, then what is 9? Because it's a 6 turned upside down. 9 is the number for destruction. Upside down, right? And so 10 is judgment, and 11 begins a new age. You got a new 1. 1, 1. It's a 10 and a 1. So it's a new beginning. That's the new age they ushered in. So let me go to my cards here, and we'll see where we can pick it up. Because the 2 columns then are the symbols of Freemasonry, which are, if you see the pictures of all their iconography and all their graphics, you know, in their elegant, with ladders going up and a star and a moon up there on the columns, it's the Jachin and Boaz. Jachin and Boaz is for sun and moon. The two columns represent the powers that bring forth life on earth. The two powers are the two columns, sun and moon, that come together to create life on earth, okay? And so Farrar Fenton, who gave us the Farrar Fenton Bible in 1905, is the only one that got it right. Because now Farrar Fenton, just so to qualify his view and his scholarship, is when he was around 1860, coming out of college, saw all of the political stuff going on, all the mistranslations, all, you know, the religious conflicts going on. He said, you know, I decided that I was not going to read any English scriptures. And for the next 40 years, he read nothing but the Hebrew, the Greek, and the Aramaic. 40 years, he said, because I don't want to be influenced by doctrine, by politics, by mistake, by opinion, by any of those things. I'm going to read the most ancient documents, not the originals, because there are no originals, but the oldest copies that are extant and available. I'm going to read them myself. And so after 40 years, interesting, because it took me, you know, over 40 years to get to where I'm at with, you know, the translations I'm doing, and the same for him. 40 years later, he then creates the English, modern English version, the Farrar Fenton Bible, 1905. You can get a copy from artisanpublishers.com, my friends for 20 years, artisanpublishers.com. Tell them Desert sent you. And but that's where we get the Farrar Fenton Bible, because nobody else is making it available. Interesting, because Farrar Fenton, unlike our King James or any of our other modern translations, when we see Israel going through its routines, we hear about idols. Oh, they made idols. Idol this, idol that. But you know what is interesting? In Fenton, it's not about idols. It's about columns. They were told that they were never to make columns with the altar in the middle, and they passed their children over the fire on the altar through the two columns, right, to become part of the Molochian tradition, or, you know, the Philistines or whoever, you know, whatever occultic tradition it was, you know, that was doing this stuff. But so Fenton is the only translation that translated it right, because all others are controlled by the beast system. But Fenton was a free thinker. He could see and read for himself, mastered it, became the all-time master. And so the idols in our scriptures are the columns. And so when they sacrifice people on the altar between the two columns, now you can get the picture that the two towers in 2001 on the occultic high day, then 9/11, that it was an occultic ritual and a blood sacrifice that had gone on for hundreds and thousands of years. The old game is the new game, the bigger game. The two columns.
Plus, they stole all the gold during.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure, and they had it in the right place. You know, when what's interesting is that Building 7 was a fortress. It was built so that if New York City was attacked, all the political guys and all the police and all the secret agents would all go into the Building 7. How come they didn't do that? Nobody ran into Building 7. We're going to talk about that. Twin towers, two columns. They are the columns of Baal, B-A-A-L. The two A's represent the two columns, because one A is silent. It's a consonant. The first letter of the alphabet is a consonant. Then the vowel point in the ancient is what they never even wrote. It was breathed. As you read, you use the vowel. So there's a consonant, which is the first letter of the alphabet, A, and then the vowel was spoken. It was the A sound. Otherwise, it was silent. So you got two A's. It's not Baal, it's Baal. So one is silent and one is speaking. And that's your duality. Because whatever is speaking in the world is the liar. And the one that's remaining silent behind the scene is the truth and the Father of light. He lets them do what they do. He lets them get away with what they get away with. Remember, the victims have a day of retribution. If they were good people and they did everything, you know, to serve their fellow man and to do right, the divine wind is with them. They may have been sacrifices, but it doesn't mean their life is over. You know, so that's the good news, that no matter what situation we're in, if we've been serving the Father of light and serving our fellow man, the divine justice is in our favor. That's the good news. We can always know that. It's tragic to go through what we have to go through to leave this world, but the good news is our spirit is eternal, and we have to be good spirits, you know, and learn the truth, because the truth is not a part of any lie. Can't be a little pregnant and not pregnant. The truth is not a part of any lie. You know, and so that's what we have to do, is we have to find all the lies. When you get done looking at all the lies, throw them off the table. What you got left is the truth. And that's what we're talking about today, the third truth that nobody's talking about, but we are here. So, did you want to play your little clip and take a little, you know, and then finish off, or do you just want to keep going? No, I appreciate that, Jesse. Let me go ahead and do that. Yeah. You could tell, huh? All right, here we go. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so honored to be on with Jesse. Jesse, what's your last name again? Howell. Jesse Howell on the Missing Link, and for bringing this on today. He's a noble gentleman, and I'm honored to say I'm 25% Canadian. So hey, I've got my foot in the fire here today with Jesse. So we'll be right back. Don't go away. Right, we're back on The Missing Link. I'm so excited here today to be with nobody calls me, Jesse. You know, my phone never rings. Nobody wants to talk to me anymore because you know, when you learn the truth, you find yourself very alone. Or the axiom was you'll know the truth and it will make you an exile, you know, or something like that.
Happens to a lot of people, and a lot of people that are in our community feel that way. And you know, just being a part of our community has helped a lot of people, because to show that they're not alone and that there's other people that, you know the truth, or searching for the truth, or, you know, are no longer blinded by the lies of deception that, you know, is presented to everybody from generation after generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been the same struggle, basically, you know, different cultures, different names, different faces, you know, but it's been the same struggle, because there's one group that is organized against another group. And when we get into the forbidden history on another broadcast, we'll you know, because it is in the words again, and the words are road signs to history. And so when you know the meaning of words, that really helps. So we'll go there one day. And so what we're really talking about here in this takedown of the columns. Remember, let's look at columns again. Because columns, we see in the word Columbia, right? Columbia Pictures, Columbia Records, District of Columbia, British Columbia in Canada, Columbia, South America, right? And Columbine, where the shooting occurred, right? Another experiment, mind control experiment, column. So you see the word columns and you see the word by, Columbine. And so who discovered America? Oh, Columbus. You see, so you look at the patterns and the words and you realize something's going on here. You know, why is it, you know, we got a Columbia in Canada, Columbia in America, Columbia in South America, right? And because it's a high sign to those who are in the occultic world. What we're dealing with is a Khazarian, Ashkenazi, Jewish, Masonic, Kabbalistic ritual that cares not for you and I. We are on our own, and all of our families are in grave danger by this culture, you know, that is affecting us. You know, Rockefeller, in his after they built, you know, the Rockefellers were part instrumental funding, you know, and involved with you know, the building of the Twin Towers. Well, then in his cameo shot, and by the way, after I'm done with the presentation, I'm glad to stay on if people want to ask me questions for as long as I can hang in there. Okay, I'll be glad to do that. So David Rockefeller, you know, and I grew up in New Jersey, Central Jersey, so I used to go to New York all the time, you know, with my dad or my mom, or I skipped school, and I go to New York, and, you know, we're always Rockefeller Center, Rockefeller Square, there's your Masonic Square, you know, the Rockettes, at Rockefeller Center, all of that. And it's amazing because I saw their power back then when I was growing up. Who's got all this money? How do they get it? Because there is no money, and it's an illusion, and they're agents. They're agents of the beast system. And so David Rockefeller, in his cameo painting, they made a painting, like a photo of Rockefeller, and his watch in the painting, in his dedication cameo shot to the 9/11 towers, his watch was on 9/11, showing you that, even 20 years before they built it, 20 years before they even broke ground, they had planned on doing it just like the Titanic, taking it down, to show you how powerful they really are. They use us, our energy resource, our labor. We work for them. When we are the order takers, when we are the builders and the constructors of these things, we need a job, so we end up going to work for their, building their underground bases or building their rocket ships. They learn, it's interesting that they learned how to wage war on on the world. Where did they discuss how they're going to wage war? Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva, which means the generations of Eve, and they say that in the Hebrew it means hatred. So they hate the generations of Eve. They hate mankind. They had to follow the Babylonian Talmud. In order to follow such a wicked book, they had to be taught to hate, because the only way they could justify killing you is if they can justify hating you. Slave. They hate their slaves. They hate the cattle. They love their dog better than they love you, ladies and gentlemen. And it's a fact. It's a fact. You can see it when your eyes are open, finally. Especially when you're in the freedom movement, because you run into them. I ran into them left and right. I've had all kinds of games played on me by them. Big time games. I'm going to take a sip, and I'm going to tell you about the day it all began.
I just had a question here about if you can repeat where to get your books, and also that Bible, the author, and how they can get a copy of that as well.
Right. The For Our Friends in Bible is from artisanpublishers.com. Artisanpublishers.com. And also George Lamsa from the Aramaic is there as well, 1930s. George Lamsa, the Peshitta, Peshitta. But Fenton, For Our Fenton, and both George Lamsa are there. Highly recommend them. They wouldn't let Lamsa publish his version here in America. They said, George, if you let us rewrite it, we'll publish it. So he figured, something is better than nothing. And so, yeah. But it's evidence. It'll create evidence of the more pure translations, ladies and gentlemen. Both of those books, okay? And if you go to Amazon or Lulu.com or Kobo.com, any one of those venues, search for A. Micah Hill Desert Owl, okay? A. Micah Hill Desert Owl, and that will bring you, all of the books should come up, okay? So check it out. And if anybody doesn't have, the money to buy these books, because we're in a bad situation today and it's getting worse, then if they contact us, I assume our contact information is on your material, on your postings. Jess, if they contact us through email, then we'll, if they can't make a donation, then we'll just give it to them on a PDF. Okay, we can give to anybody on a PDF. They just need to contact us. All right.
This is how good that Desert Owl is here. He wants the information out, and for anyone that can't help contribute, he's willing to just give the information on PDF for free, because it's more important to give the information out than it is to collect one of their fake dollars for.
Yeah, just tell us what book you're interested in. If on the pre-offer, we just ask that you request it one at a time. Not to overwhelm us, because I've got Ninja as my backup, and he's overwhelmed already. So just one request, if you need to request a free one, and do that, maybe once every other week or something like that, and that'll help slow it down. But we we want to give it away. The knowledge. Now I got a background noise coming through, Jesse, real loud, like a fan or something. What is that?
It might be my computer because I'm playing a video in the background. It might just be the computer. You can hear it.
Okay, I guess I should turn down my speaker then. I'll do that. Okay, but I won't hear you. That's the thing. If I turn it down too far.
Can you still hear me?
I still hear you. I turned it down a little. Yeah, okay. It's rather annoying. I don't know what that is. Okay, so on the morning of 9/11, and they always have those morning programs, ABC This Morning, Good Morning America, or all those morning programs, right? So we got on NBC, and Tom Brokaw, I like to call him Tom Brokenjaw. He's Canadian, by the way. Now it's winding down. That sounds great. Whatever that is. He comes on with the commercial while they're having the morning program on September 11th, 2001. They're having a morning program, and then they go to the commercial. And on the commercial, all of a sudden we hear Tom Brokenjaw, and he says, "Later this evening, ladies and gentlemen, later this evening, we're having a special presentation, 9/11, when seconds count." And so what he's talking about is like, using the emergency call-in number, they punch 911 on the phone, they get the police come to save us, right? And so they're having a commercial. Later this evening, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a special program for you to watch. 9/11, when seconds count. Are you getting it, Jesse? On the day they took it down, it's like a high sign, right? Don't forget, when seconds count, you better get out of there. Right? What a joke, huh? 9/11. 9/11. Are you still there? I'm just making sure.
I was just muted my mic because it was loud.
Okay, yeah, that helps. Actually that does help. So that was the morning commercial. To remind everybody, don't forget, this is the day. This is the day, ladies and gentlemen. That mute really works good, I guess, Jesse, if you want to use that, because I don't know why that's gotten so loud all of a sudden. Thank you. And so what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen, is not a loose-knit bunch of cavalier cowboys or something, but what we're talking about is the most sophisticated and fine-tuned military operation that ever hit the planet. With a mock terrorist scenario. Imagine the day it happens, they have their mock scenario so that they shut off certain channels, right? And then the people, when they're being confronted with, well, was there a hijacking or wasn't there a hijacking? They don't know because they're confused because there's a mock scenario. So they turn down NORAD. They turn it off for the quick response, right? Because technically, if there was any hijackings going on or any attack going on, the military would be up in the air in 5 minutes, be able to shoot down anything if it were true. But they don't need to hijack anything because it's the grand illusion. I'm not saying that some planes were not hijacked, because they were. There was no crash in Pennsylvania. Okay, whatever crashed in Pennsylvania was a missile, because there was no airplane there. There was no wreckage, no luggage, no bodies, nothing but a crater and debris of a missile. And but what I learned about that particular flight is it landed in Ohio, and the plane stopped on the tarmac. They had to evacuate the airport terminal so there would be no witnesses. And then when they got the people out of the airplane, they took them somewhere they've never been seen again. They no doubt went to the underground bases because they had to be sacrificed because they were on one of the planes that was supposed to have been shot down. Okay, that's one of the planes. Let me continue here. So what's interesting about the Twin Towers, and we'll be back on the airplanes in a little bit here, about this is that just before all of this happened, a brother of George Bush Jr., the El Presidente, mind-controlled victim that they had to put in a closet every night because he was so stupid, so pathetic, you know, for anybody who can pay attention. Another son of George Bush Sr., I don't remember his name, but he took over security for the Twin Towers just months before all of this occurred. Put two and two together, right? And just before all of this happened, a Jewish billionaire bought up the towers and then cashed in on billions of dollars of profit for this double accident that supposedly occurred. And yeah, so it was his Goldenstein, and when he went on the interview, he did an interview with you know, about all this. He was wearing an orange tie, and the orange is the symbol of the 33-degree Freemasons. So wherever you see the orange, you see the Freemasons are speaking. It's about symbolism, remember? All about, you got to read the symbols, not hear what they say, but see how they act, see how they move their hands and how they dress, and all the flashing on the news media, you know, like, if, you know, that's, you got to just know it, ladies and gentlemen. Walmart put out the 33-degree orange just before the phony pandemic. You know, they had the parking lots apportioned for delivery to your home because they knew it was coming, and so the 33 orange. And you see it on the flag of India, by the way. That's a clue to the forbidden history that I talk about, the flag of India. I talked about the ancient Aryan Brahmin sovereign Aryan faction. That's why there's orange and green on the flag in India. That's a story we'll touch on in another day. So, even though all the airplanes were grounded once there was supposedly some problem, there was one airplane that was allowed to fly out of the country, and it just happened to be the Friends of the Bushes. And it was the bin Laden family, who were partners with the Bushes in construction and petrochemicals, and also in the military deception against our planet and our people. Okay, so they had a meeting, and it was like the last, you know, huddle. Okay, before the game plays, let's remember this is what you're going to do. Your sick brother, what was Osama bin Laden? You know, we'll make him the boogeyman. He used to work for the CIA, so he's perfect, you know, and we'll make him the bad guy so that we can then blame Afghanistan and say that this guy from a cave somewhere actually pulled off this Masonic Israeli Mossad stunt. You know, it was interesting that Dmitry Kozlov, who gave us the third truth and told us how these Twin Towers were taken down, which I'm about to get to, he said that he was invited by the head of the Mossad. His first name is Michael. I don't remember his last name. Dmitry Kozlov was invited to his party. The Israeli Mossad had a party after they had a successful Masonic order occult ritual bloodbath of 3,000 Americans and other foreign nationals. They had a party that night, and Dmitry was invited. Of course, he didn't go, but he knew the truth, and it was the third truth. So the towers, if you look at this picture now on the screen, I picked this picture for specific reasons. And if you notice, they look like two chimneys. And that's important to the way that they were taken down. Because these buildings were of a new design for steel structured buildings. The old structure was with what we call girders, classic girders. And they create cubes. You got a girder everywhere. And so when you have your office area, you got beams everywhere in the office area that you could bump into if you weren't looking where you were going, because it was the girder structure. Now, I watched a documentary on how these buildings were built, and they were built with the new structure of a steel outer casing with the concrete core center, which is where the elevators were housed. And from the outer steel structure, the floors were joisted over to the center core. Therefore, with this type of structure, all of the floors were cantilevered, and you had no beams inside the office area, if you can imagine what I'm describing. It's an office area with no beams because the steel structure is on the outside, and it's joisted to the center core structure, freeing up the entire office area with no obstructions. And so this is key to their plan on how they were going to take it down. Okay, so let me continue here. So what's interesting, before, you know, the buildings are finished, right at the point of construction, like maybe 1979, thereabouts. I remember when they were building them because it was my backyard, and I don't remember how long it took to build them, but it took a couple years, I think. I remember seeing them go up as a teenager. So at one point, this French tightrope walker is invited. I know he was invited secretly to do a tightrope walk from one building to another, because remember, it's about symbolism, and signs and symbols rule the world. And so if you can read the symbolism, when the guy is doing the tightrope, he's speaking to the secret societies. So he sneaks up there, goes past security, and then he, one morning real early, shoots a bow and arrow over to the other side, and the guy gets it, and they pull the cable over from the other side with the rope, you know, and they tighten it down, tie it down. And then at 8 a.m. in the morning, one morning when the towers are almost done, this guy from France is walking the tightrope from one building to another, and, you know, dancing up there for maybe, I don't know, half hour or so. Then they call the police, but everybody on the ground's going, look, look. They're all looking up at the guy walking on the tightrope, you see? And so if you read the symbolism, what they're reminding all of their secret society buddies is, don't forget, you are walking the tightrope, and you better do your job, because it's about our lives and death that are on the line here. We got to keep the game going, and we're walking the tightrope. So that's the symbolism behind that, ladies and gentlemen. You got to know that they're always speaking, but you got to know how to read it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, you can see it, no doubt, when it's presented to you, right, Jesse?
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, so while the towers were building, well, okay, now I had my card situated wrong. So now, when the fires occurred that day, now when we saw the first explosion, the firemen down below, oh, talk about French again, the French, right? Because, you know, the French in this New World Order thing, Old World Order, is really relevant in the secret societies. You know, we had the French Revolution, a new liberation going on, and it was all Freemasonic again, you know. When we saw, so when the firemen were looking at a manhole, they were looking at possible gas leak on the ground floor in the streets, and then all of a sudden we see this picture where they look up because we hear this aircraft coming across the sky, and then they see it go into the building, and they all go, whoa, you know. And so, but it wasn't an airliner, it was a missile. You know, what they saw was a missile, and it was not an airliner. And that's important to know, because the second one in the second tower, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you know, was not an airplane but a hologram. But they get people that come forward and say they saw an airplane, but those are the actors. You know, they get the actors to do their bidding for them. So what's interesting is that across the the Hudson River on the New Jersey side, there was a guy, a film producer, and he set up his camera and he filmed everything from the Jersey shore, you know, a clear view. And he made his comments later. You know, he typed them in, and he knew what, you know, he figured out what was going on, and showed some key things like with helicopters when they were going over, that are connected with what I'm about to, you know, share about how they were really taken down. But what's interesting, he's listening to the radio. And remember, I talked about number 10 earlier. I said, where did the 10 go? Right? 9/11. We got 9, and then we get 11. Well, wait a minute. What happened to 10, right? So he's listening to a radio station out of New York City while he's filming everything. And the radio station is called 1010 Wins. And so they're talking about, oh, the towers, look at what's going on. And well, you're listening to 1010 Wins. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. You know, so throughout the entire ordeal, when we're watching lives, you know, it was like 3 people jumped every minute. If I remember the numbers right, it was like 1,500 people, some enormous number, fell to the ground. So it was like 3 people a minute were jumping to their death. And the whole time this is going on, we're hearing 1010 wins, 1010 wins. You see the symbolism again. Get it. They control everything. They control the media. They control the mayor, Giuliani at the time. Why didn't he go to Building 7? Why didn't everybody go to Building 7 if they're under attack when it was built, just in case we had a foreign attack? Because they knew Building 7 was going down. 1010 wins. And 1010 added up and you get 20. 2020. Maybe there's more to the story that we haven't figured out yet. So basically, what happened was, while this is going on and they're talking about it, they're relating to the buildings that are on fire as ground zero. Well, wait a minute. If you look up in the dictionary, the only definition for any dictionary at that time for ground zero is a place where a nuclear device is detonated. But Dimitri will tell you that ever since he came out with the third truth, I'm closing my curtains here, I've got a little heat coming in, so sorry about that.
No worries.
Dimitri will tell you that they immediately started reprinting the old dictionaries, and they then gave further definitions to ground zero. It could be this, it could be that, or it could be this, okay? So but literally on the day it was going down, the news reporters were saying, ground zero, ground zero. You know what that is, right? Yeah, I get it. I get it, because the word for nuclear is, are you ready? Nuclear. Nuclear. It's a new way of clearing things out of the way for the new. And that leads us into the final segment here, Jesse, because the question is, how did they do it? And what was it that did it? And that's the million-dollar question. But yet, if you can see things clearly from a journalistic standpoint for the listener, and put pieces together of a puzzle, it creates a picture. And I'm putting evidence on the table. It's up to the listener to decide for themselves to try to recapture this. Maybe you got to listen to it again. But nuclear is nuclear. N-E-W-C-L-E-A-R. Okay? And so when a building like the Twin Towers, which were like the biggest complex were complicated, right? Complex in modern history for at least the U.S. Well, I'm hearing an echo back here, and it's throwing me off. So I'm trying to focus. Here,
I'm going to mute, but I'm just going to answer something here. So,
okay.
Yeah, just a question. So all of our videos are, on our Facebook page, The Missing Link, which, each one of this is the 66th interview. And it's all on our Facebook page. None of them have been deleted. We also have a YouTube channel, which, all 66 minus 3 videos, they deleted the David Icke, they deleted the Max Egan, and they deleted the Judy Mikovits.
And I'll be deleted.
I've got two strikes on that YouTube channel, which I'm on a suspension right now. So we're broadcasting on our High Vibe Love Tribe channel, which we have for the last few interviews, just so it's on YouTube as well. But we also are going to upload all of the videos to BitChute and to Rumble. We have a Rumble account and a BitChute account, which we've uploaded about 14 or 15 videos so far. And as well as I'm going to try to figure out the Telegram. We've got a Missing Link Telegram, so we're going to put all the 66 interviews on Telegram as well. But for right now, all our videos are still on all 65, and now the 66th one will be on our Facebook page called The Missing Link. So we just had some questions, so I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm going to put it on mute so you don't hear any of that echo.
Okay, Jesse, thank you. And way to go, yeah. And yeah, we'll be taking off of YouTube as well, for sure. It's really tough. It's tough anymore to have a place to go. My radio network, the realpublicradio.net, only lasted 6 years and infiltrated, taking down about half a dozen people, coming from different directions. When you do it out of your back pocket, it's hard to save, your work, and that's the way it goes. So the question is, how do you, if you're going to build the largest structure in America, or maybe in the world at that time, a complex, I like that word, complex, how do you take it down? So the law was in New York City that if you're going to build a giant building, you got to give us the blueprint on how to take it down. And since these were the biggest buildings ever constructed like this, then they gave the blueprint. And Dmitry knew what the blueprint was. The Soviet Union knew what the blueprint was, because whenever there is movement of nuclear material in the U.S. or in the Soviet Union or anywhere else in the world, the treaty demanded that these movements of nuclear material would be accounted for, so that nobody could sneak on another, a nuclear device. And so this is how the game was played. And so they knew back in the 1970s how the towers could be taken down. And it was through this unique structure that was built, incorporated into the final blueprint, which is that they would take it down with a 15 megaton thermonuclear hydrogen bomb. Just enough, placed directly under the foundations of both towers. As Dmitry said, that when they did underground testing, the nuclear device would blow a perfect sphere. It would melt the rock, and it was so sealed with glass that you could store chemicals in these round spheres. And so they knew that if they buried the device at a certain level underground, the very top of the sphere could be directly positioned under the foundation while it continued to blow up. And because of the unique structure of these office buildings, with no interference in their structure, but a cantilevered flooring with a central core of concrete, the central core then became the first chimney that took the blast from the basement straight up to the top. And by the time the nuclear power, what do you want to call it, energy began to expand out, then began to expand out from the very core. And if anybody has really looked at any of these videos from that time, they will see the steel outer casing peeling away from the building and then disintegrating in dust right on the camera. Now let me back up for a minute, because I'm missing something here. So let me turn on your microphone for a minute, and I'm going to ask you a question, Jesse.
Okay.
Have you ever played softball?
Not yeah, well, there was a beer league I was in for 1 year.
Okay, so not a hard ball, but you know the softball is a bigger ball, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you've hit a softball before?
Yep.
Okay, so did you ever at any time imagine when you were going to hit the softball that maybe the softball might go through the bat instead of hitting the ball? It may go through the bat. Did you ever think that that could happen?
No.
Never crossed your mind, right?
No.
Okay, but yet they've convinced everybody that an airliner with aluminum wings and a plastic nose and aluminum fuselage, right, was going to go ahead and penetrate 2 layers of constructed steel, each layer 2.5 inches thick, and it created a cube. It created a square. So you had lengthy 2.5-inch steel backed by 2.5-inch steel flat. So you had 2 flat and 1 on each side, creating a cube. So literally 5 inches of steel. So how can anybody imagine that an aluminum airplane could penetrate, a tin can could penetrate steel? Impossible. And what happened, and it was well established that there were crews coming in late at night with the Bush administration as the policing agent, and they strategically laid charges on different floors so that when the hologram, which is what really occurred in the second explosion, the hologram came through into the building, and you can't miss it now that you know it if you go back and look. Okay, that they strategically placed charges in the building to make it look like an airplane went through. Even the wings. You know, if anything ever could penetrate, it would only be the core of the airplane, right, if it could do it. But yet they even made the blast so it looked like the wings went through. You know, that's the grand deception, ladies and gentlemen, because what they did is they created a scenario so you think it's one thing when it's another thing. And even the metal pouring out of the building on a couple corners, there was like molten steel, you know, pouring out of the building, and then people got into the argument that no, it was really thermite, it wasn't nuclear, or nobody even talks about nuclear, right? They were saying it wasn't demolition, like, you know, the way they do demolition, but it was the thermite. But yet, if it were thermite, you'd have to have it on every floor and every part of the building, and the building would melt because thermite melts a building. But this building turned into dust. The only thing that remained was paper. For some reason, it didn't kill paper, but all the anomalies that occurred on the ground. One guy fell from the 50th floor, and he floated down. In the documentary that I watched by National Geographic, one lady actually on the documentary said she saw people flying through the air. And that's what a couple people said. They were picked up and moved by this kinetic energy that was coming through. But the bottom line is, if you had a 110-story building collapse, right? If it collapsed, you would at least have 33 or 30 floors of rubble, at least 10 stories of rubble. But what we had left after all the dust was cleared was nothing less than a half a story of rubble. So where did it go? Well, it was no different than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that even people's bodies were disintegrated and their image was left on the face of a wall in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But those who were near ground zero were disintegrated. The buildings, the people, everything disintegrated.
Except for the passport.
Go ahead, Jesse, I'm sorry.
Except for the passport.
Oh, yeah, except for the passport, right, yeah. Who was that guy's name? His name is a code, by the way. That guy's name, whatever, I can't remember it off the top of my head right now.
One of the supposed hijackers' passport was, just found in all the disintegrated rubble.
Yeah, and all that fire, right, and all that. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, continuing here. So what we had. So when I was watching this the first time, the day it happened, I learned about it right as it happened. I was listening to a guy on shortwave radio I used to listen to, and he says, "Hey, the tower just been hit, so go check it out." And I turned it on. I watched the whole thing, and what we had at one point, because this was a Masonic ritual, because this was a Kabbalistic banking ritual, occult ritual, you know, the Masons and, you know, all the key people knew what was going on. In fact, you know, the Jews didn't go into the building that day except for the patsies, those, you know, who fall victim and are not in the inner core, because not all Jews are part of the conspiracy. You know, they're not all bad people. I've got some good friends that are, you know, the Jewish culture. You know, they're good people. It's an elite. You know, they've enslaved all of mankind. It's Aryan. I'm Aryan. They've enslaved me with the birth certificate. They, you know, circumcised me when I was born with the knife. You know, out of their hospitallers, the Knights Templars hospitallers. You know, put two and two together. So what happened was, because the Masons didn't want to kill all their firemen, at one point they strategically located them at a gathering point. And then while the buildings are burning and people are jumping, instead of running to the building to help as much as they could to put out the fire, they lined them up in the military columns. And it was like 20 people across and 20 columns deep, and they started marching them in a slow death march towards the columns, and because they knew that the columns were going to come down before they could get there. So that's how they saved a lot of the firemen. They lined them up and got them to march like in a death march, like they were going to their death. And so it was a ritual. And I picked up on that right away. It's like, okay, people are dying and jumping, and they're over there going to crawl, you know, walk over there like they're in a death march. You know, so that's what it was. It was a Masonic ritual. And don't you know, it's ironic that it was a Masonic ritual, and then when there was the memorial parade for all those who died, you got the Scottish Rite bagpipes playing at the front of the parade. And wherever you hear the bagpipes, you hear the Scottish Rite. You see? So it was a Scottish Rite ritual, and that goes into, you know, Jewish banking and Kabbalism, all under the Jesuit control. It's a secret military. The real military is the secret military. Missions, as they set up missions in California and other parts of the world, the religious mission. Mission is a military code word. What do they call war? They call war theater. Theater, because it's a stage. They put dog tags on because dog is God backwards, because they do what their God tells them to do. They're the dogs. They're the priests of war. So what Dimitri proved out in his 5-hour presentation, he shows from one building, there's a camera that they captured. And you see the ground shaking. The ground shakes. And then in 10 seconds after the camera shakes violently, in 10 seconds, the building collapses, because that was the underground detonation. And then the charge goes straight up through the building and then blows out in that dustification that Judy Wood talked about, you know. And so then you see the steel falling away from the building and disintegrating right before your eyes. If people haven't seen it, you need to look for it if it's still there. You know, a lot of these videos have been taken down now. But these are all the things that you could see. In the hologram, you can't miss that the second plane was a hologram if you look at it closely. Several ways of looking at it.
We have the name of in the picture of up on the screen of the passport guy. Satam al-Suqami.
Okay, then I'm thinking of the other guy that hijacked it. It's another name, but it was on the tip of my tongue. Atla. I want to say Atla. I can't remember, but it's a code. It's a code, and if I can remember it, I could probably spell it out a little bit. But anyway, so here's more evidence that it was a nuclear device. And Dimitri spelled it out just right. Because, remember that the North Tower was hit first. But the North Tower went down second, right? So the building that was hit first was hit last. Why? Because in Building 7, they had a tunnel built from Building 7, the strategic security building, going underneath each of the towers. And they had rail cars in the tunnel. And so they put the nuclear device on a rail car, and then they sent it off underneath the building to be detonated. And so the reason that the South Tower, which was hit second, had to come down first is because it was further away. And if they would have taken down with the nuclear device the North Tower first, they would not have been able to penetrate to the South Tower because it would have destroyed the underground. And that's why the tower that was hit last went down first. And then what happened? They then had to destroy the evidence. And to destroy the evidence, they took down Building 7. And so, but we got him red-handed in Building 7 because there was a journalist who went in with his camera. And it was all the dust, all the paper, right? Nobody there, the alarm going off, beep, 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 right? And so he goes in the building, he goes up the escalator in Building 7, and there's an officer up there, in a blue uniform. And this guy's doing a documentary, right? So he says, are they abandoning the building? Yeah, you got to get out. You got to go to the building. It's not safe. And, and so he says, okay, well, so who are you and who do you work for? And he goes, well, and he got put on the spot, and all of a sudden, so he didn't know what to do. So he goes, well, I'm John Bigelow, and I'm with such and such agency. And so the guy told the truth. And so when the journalist went back to his office and he looked up the agency, the guy that he was talking to was the only agency in America that was allowed to transport nuclear material.
Wow. Yeah.
Red-handed. See the red coming through. So that's the miracle. That it's all an open secret, and somewhere somebody gets it and preserves it. And if we do the diligent research, we get it. We piece it together like a puzzle. So Building 7 is the fortress, but Building 7 goes down just like the others in 8 seconds right into its footprint. And people think it was a demolition. Well, it was a demolition, but they didn't lace it. They didn't have time to lace it with demolition. It was the nuclear. What better way to do it when you've been, as the United States government has activated over 1,000 nuclear explosions, most of them being underground. They perfected it, right? They perfected it. So that. Go ahead.
Some people are asking here about what about DEW weapon. Another person says, does he believe scalar weaponry, direct energy weapons, was used as well in reference to the melted cores and such? Just curious his take on that.
No, it wasn't needed because the nuclear explosion solves all the problem. It turns everything into dust, and that's why they had to make the outer steel casing. They made the towers into chimneys, and that way the blast could only go up straight. It started at the core, the concrete core, and expands out. As an explosion expands out with all that kinetic energy. And just by the way, here's more evidence. The Sears Tower. You remember, Jesse, hearing that in Chicago the Sears Tower was evacuated?
Yeah.
The reason is because the Sears Tower was the only other building that was built exactly like the Twin Towers, with an outer steel core casing and a blueprint to take it down with a nuclear device. The owners got scared.
Wow.
They evacuated the building. Sears Tower. Why only the Sears Tower, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see? And so two and two together. And so clean up, hear more evidence, to clean up the people who would go there to, look for rescue and try to pull all the material out. Their steel-toe boots at the end of the day were melting. Nuclear. All the people that worked on the pile, the dogs, the officers, all dying of cancer. Because on a nuclear field, you can't even go there for 2 weeks. Can't even go there for 2 weeks. And after that, you got to go there with protection. They went there within hours of it going down. And so all these people are pretty well dead today, or got cancer, leukemia, or whatever. So on the streets, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it was Mohammed Atta was the name of the guy?
Yeah, there it is, Atta. Because it's, you see ATTA, forward and backwards, it's an anagram. And the AT is the symbol of the alphabet. Alpha and tau. The last original letter of the alphabet is the tau. And so it's from beginning to end, from end to beginning. You see, it's a metaphor. So Atta, his name became a metaphor for the takedown and the creation of the new. Atta. That's a code. So you got to know the etymologies like I do to know that's right in your face. Remember I said at the beginning, when I got into the political activism, I was amazed to find out that everything they were talking about, the names of people and everything else, was a symbolism, So on the streets, when they're doing interviews with people, with the news people, they've got actors. And so the actor, like one actor goes, oh yeah, the plane, I saw the plane hit the building, and then because of the fire, the steel structure couldn't handle it and the whole building collapsed. The guy, green on the street, and he's going to give the whole analysis, right? Whole analysis, some greenhorn, but what does that do? It puts it in the mind of people. Oh yeah, that's what happened. Oh yeah, Afghanistan's. Osama bin Laden in a cave. Friends of Bush.
Makes it plausible.
Yeah. So, so the truth is stranger than fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed stranger than fiction. And so you got the third truth. What you do with it is your business, okay? I don't care. But I'm happy to share today what's most clear to me and was important for me to know to answer my questions about what really happened on that day. So be safe, and I'm willing to answer any questions. Well, we're all in trouble, and we're not safe. Our families are not safe. Our little ones are not safe. And I can't say that there's anything we can do to stop this serpent cult, but at least I want to know how they're playing their game so I can be prepared, and maybe I can help people to survive as long as possible while they play their games on mankind.
Well, so these are some of the questions that we've had. We have a real good friend in Australia. It's now, I think, like 5 a.m. there or something, so he's asleep by now. But he was asking earlier, in Australia, they've been really locked down, and it's gotten worse. They say things are even going to get worse and in the next couple of weeks for severe lockdowns. Is there anything that they can do in Australia?
Yeah, and Jesse, I think I need one more. I've got one more break available.
Sure. Of course, let's do that, and then we'll get to some questions.
Yeah, that'll help me out. So let me do that. I'm feeling it. And so don't go away, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. And thanks to Jesse Howell on The Missing Link. You heard it here first. If not, you're hearing it again. So we'll be right back. Okay, and welcome back to the Missing Link, ladies and gentlemen. And let me turn this back on. I'm learning the tricks on the Missing Link as well here. And I guess I'm a co-host today. And thanks to Jesse, he's very easy to work with, and love his spirit. I know I'm working with the True Blue brother out there today. And by the way, if anybody wants to know our channel, you know, where they can always ask questions and join us, I have a program called Ask Desert Owl. Okay, it's on Ninja Cat. You'll see a cat on the logo on the YouTube channel. Ask Desert Owl. That'll get you there. And feel free to you know, check us out. We've got actually 4 other channels: the Cosmic Essence, the Asia Vortex, just like it sounds. Asia Vortex, 2 words, and then the Forbidden History Archive. The Forbidden History Archive, and I've got one other channel, but I can't remember what it is. I keep getting locked out of my own channels. So, but anyway, yeah, and everything else happens. You know, it's when you tell the truth, everything that can happen will happen, and it does. And before Jesse, before I get into the Q&A, I just want to mention 2 books. Arthur Koestler, The 13th Tribe. If you want to know about the true nature of the people that are running our world for the Vatican, how they operate, these are the two best books. Arthur Koestler, it's spelled Koestler, Arthur, Arthur, Arthur Koestler, The 13th Tribe. Okay, those who claim to be Israel but are not Israel. And but they are banking, and they are other things as well. And then this other book by a wonderful Jewish friend of all of us, because he came out. He knew I was going multimillionaire. Came out way back when, 100 years ago or 70 years ago, and he wrote the book Facts Are Facts. He wanted to state simple facts, and it's a short read, on 100 pages. But Facts Are Facts, and it's by Benjamin H. Friedman, F-R-E-E-D-M-A-N, Benjamin H. Friedman. That was 1954, okay, 1954, 2 years before I was born. And so get these books, because it'll help you to see clearly, you know, how the world is operating covertly by people that are claiming to be the victims. Oh, you know, anti-Semitism. Oh, you know, they're picking on me because I'm something, you know, and it's the greatest show on earth, ladies and gentlemen. They're not Semites, and it's all a ruse. Anti-Semitism came to Arthur Dodd. You know, that was the first time it was used against Arthur Dodd of the Reece Commission. It's another story for another day. I'll go there. But yeah, that's we know when it actually first was used, and it's a great ploy. Great ploy. It's who asked the question, who can you not talk about? Who can you not? And also Dane Wigington on YouTube. Go check him out, because it's the core issue that's confronting us all, the annihilation of our planet, geospherically, you know, physically. Dane Wigington, D-A-N-E, first name, Wigington, W-I-G-I-N-G-T-O-N. Now, Jesse, back to you and your questions. You're muted out.
Mike is muted. Okay, just wanted to let everybody know. Again, we were blocked off our YouTube channel for 2 weeks because of the Judy Mikovits interview. 2 weeks will be next Thursday, I think, when we can come back. So we might have next week's Missing Links on our Missing Link YouTube channel. So we're not on our Missing Link YouTube channel because we can't broadcast there. So we're broadcasting on our High Vibe Love Tribe channel right now. And then someone was asking to ask you about the music. What kind of music is that, and how could they, you know, link up with the music that you were playing?
On the breaks?
Yeah.
I love that High Vibe. What did you say? High Vibe what?
High Vibe Love Tribe.
Love that. Love that. It's kind of goes with the music, actually. Well, that music is, you know, what we would call break bumper music. I don't know how to, you know, describe it, but it's, you know, for broadcasting, you know, people taking a break. That's what it's made for. So it's a 5-minute clip, and it's just enough time to take a break. So you can take the audio off of Jesse's program. You can get the audio right there and listen to it anytime you want. You know, how you can get it, what's the name of it, I don't remember, you know, if it had a name.
Okay, that was a question. People were saying they were loving the flute. So we have here saying best places to go in BC during this to keep going as long as we can. Like, you know, do you have some advice for people? Because, you know, if things are going to just get worse here, what should people be doing to prepare for, you know, what you see is coming?
Okay, the best place to be is connected with the one who made all things. Because the one who made all things reveals all things. That's where I say, you know, I'm not smart enough to figure this stuff out. What I've shared today, it's not because I'm smart. You know, it's not because I know more than anybody else, but the great Father of light, who is a revealer, you know, gives light. He's the one who made all things, is the one who reveals all things. And so I'm sharing with you what he has allowed me to observe and to know based on being at the right place, at the right time, you know, with the right intent. And so the best place to be is connected with your Redeemer. To get to know him, to realize there's more to the scriptures. Original word for scripture is shultre, because scripture is a code for skip truth. You hear it? Skip truth, scripture. It's shultre, the knowledge of the three, because three is part of the mystery. That I won't get into that. But so being close to the one who made you, the great Father of light, and doing what he says in his word, begins the road for you to being sovereign with the sovereign. The occultic claim to be super sovereigns. They got all their high-end, the grand hailing sign where they can get out of anything they do, and and all their little games and tricks they play. They're not sovereigns. They're not super sovereigns. They're scumbags. They're sellouts. They're the enemies of mankind, the enemies of the one who made all things, the enemies of the Yahweh, who is mispronounced as Yahweh, who is mispronounced as Lord. And so there's nothing more important than to get to know the one who made you, because if you're committed to serving him and doing right, he will make a way for you. All right? So it's getting to know him through the Eish of Horus. Even the corrupted scriptures still bring you the truth. But ultimately you get past it, you get through it, and you see the deeper element, and you see the tricks they've ultimately played. Once in other words, people are buying into a lie because they don't know they've been tricked. And so once you know how the game plays and how you've been tricked, then you can no longer fall victim to that element, and therefore then you're set free because you're able to see and read it for yourself. You're going to a higher level of enlightenment and awareness, consciousness. Consciousness is being aware of whatever you put your focus on is what you become aware of. So if you focus on comedies and nonsense and sports, that's all you're conscious of. But if you change your consciousness towards the important things in life, about your being, about who you really are, why you are, when you are, who you are, why you are, when you are, what you are, where you're going. Those are the important answers, because you were brought here to have an experience and to wake up to the true nature of things. And it's only to realize that this is not your world, and that there's a better world and you can find it here right now. And from here you can transcend and live forever, because you are already an eternal being. But the question is, where are you going to go? Darkness? Like, the Freemasons, they call themselves, in their rituals, oh, don't forget, ask the Grand Poobah, my new initiate, what do you want? When he says, what do you want, my son? Say, I want more light, Grand Poobah. Oh, I want more light. Let me give you another little phony token, little Bubba. Oh, now get out of here, okay? You make me sick. They have such disdain for the lower degrees, But literally, Masonic means mother, sons of darkness. They claim to be of the light, and it was Manly P. Hall, 33-degree Mason, said it clearly. Our light, the Masonic light, is darkness. So they're telling the truth, finally, Their light is darkness. But we can be a part of the light. But it's about purity, honesty, commitment, and surrender to the light, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I hope that helps.
Yeah, it totally does help. So Akrina says here, well, we have little time to learn this and get the Bible. So for what I, say there is that, the Spirit, the Creator, is all around us. You can connect to it. One of the biggest fallacies that they've tried to teach you is, or to get you away from, is, that what you hear and what you see is not really there, and the Creator's not around us. So meditate, quiet the mind, and really connect, because once you start to truly listen, then the answers will be provided.
Oh, well, absolutely. And what I was thinking, in hearing that, is the infinite is infinite. There's nothing he can't do. There's nothing he's not willing to do. He loves us. But the problem is the occult have worked overtime to deceive us and to separate us from the one who made us. So it's about plowing the field and working hard to get back to knowing the truth.
So she says she's scared the military is going to come to take her and torture us and her children.
Well, that's ultimately what's going to happen worldwide, you know. But so the important part is to know who you are, and to know who made you, and to know that no matter where you are, you can connect with Him. And when I was persecuted, and looking at the trials of my life, you know, 20 years ago, I never received more visions and more communication from the Father. So in your worst moments, if you have a pure heart, if you're truly serving, then He will interact with you. He will give you visions and dreams. You have to confront the reality that as we all come into this world, we all know that we have to leave this world. That's our reality. People in the illusion pretend that they don't know that, and they have a party. They're partying, you know. But the reality is, we're not here to have a party. We're here to define all things as they really are. And that sets us free from them.
So a few people put in, one person truly asked her, she's Shazammed your music, and it's called the Muja Kiwis flute song. And then Sharon Lind, at the same time, she brought up the YouTube link of the actual flute song. So she once Shazammed. I'm not sure how Sharon found it, but that was your, you know, flute music that you were playing. It's Muju Kiwis.
Well, good. That's Sharon is my engineer down in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So any other questions anybody have for, you know, the Desert Owl here? So we have, thank you so much for all your truth from Denise. And she also says, He will talk to you directly. He will also guide and protect you.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll give out my contact information if anyone wants to call me on the side. My phone number is 608-566-7295. 608-566-7295. Especially if you want to get a PDF. If you see any book that you want on any of our, you know, hostings of Amazon or Lulu, or, you know, and like I said, you can't afford a book, call me, tell me what you want, and Sharon down there in Australia will help me out and get it to you. Okay, so we're here to serve. We want to share these lost writings. We want to share the code-breaking dictionaries that we have with you, and we can get it on PDF if you can't afford the book. Okay, the book will help. I'm surrounded by Freemasons that want to snuff me out, and I'm sure I'm the first one they're going to break down the door on when they break down the door. You know, so you know I'm not afraid to tell the truth. There's nothing greater, more satisfying than to call a spade a spade. You know, they're the ones that have to be afraid, because they're going to answer for everything they do. The hardest thing to do is to come to terms with our reality and the fiction, and to stand strong with our Maker. You got to pursue it. You know, plowing a field is a hard thing to do. You work out a lot of sweat. You wear out, your bones ache, and you're having trouble moving that ox along, you know, but you got to do it for the benefit of your loved ones. You know, my daughter was my biggest inspiration. The reason I wanted the absolute truth was because I brought a life into the world, and I'm thinking, gee, now how do I, you know, give her a life beyond the world? And it was through the truth, the knowledge of truth. One of my favorite scriptures is 1 John 2:27. It says, the anointing that you have received of Him abides in you, and you need not that anyone teach you, because the same anointing teaches you about all things, and it is the truth, and it is not a part of any lie. And therefore, even as it leads and teaches you, you shall remain in it. So you got to stay in the truth. And it's about sacrifice. It's about compromise of the things that are in the world, separating from the illusion and also the family. It's a new family, because the first family, you know, are accidents. You could have had any mother or father. You could have had any brother or sister, but if they're not going anywhere, they're only going to want to hold you back. So you've got to be willing to stand alone with the truth. And then with that, he will bring you other brothers and sisters that are of the same kind, you know. And there's very few, because most people are happy to have the party. You know, they're lying to themselves. You know, they think this is their world, and it's not. You want this world? Good.
A lot are drug induced.
Yeah.
You know, into the pharmaceuticals, the drugs, the alcohol. A lot of them are induced into these intoxications where it keeps them sedated, and as well as the fluoride, away from, you know, wanting to learn this truth.
When you know that the few are going to make it, as the scriptures say, the few will be saved. Boy, that's putting it on the line there. That's telling you there's no time for fooling around. There's one thing that matters, and that's connecting with the one who made you. He loves you. He's the ultimate love, and that's why, you know, in the word they changed it to Lord, but it was Elohim, but it was originally Zulafhaim. It came out of Babylon as Elohim, but it's really El-Love-Haim. El-Love-Haim. Haim is the plural, meaning everyone. And love, there's the word comes from, in the Elohim. You see? So his very title expresses love. He loves everybody. You don't have to beat yourself up, you know, to say you're not worthy or something, because none of us are worthy. What he's trying to do is bring us up to the next level of worth, of value, you know. And so it doesn't matter how much you know. It's not about knowledge. It's about heart. And if you purify your heart, that's what you know, connects with him. The heart. It's in the middle of our being. Notice that the word ear is in heart. We're hearing. You hear with your heart. We try to do battle with our mind, you know, but the heart knows. We'll listen to it.
Yeah, well said. So yes, Cassia, his number is 608-566-7295. She was asking, do you put a +1 in front of it?
I think if it's international, you do. Otherwise, you don't have to.
Yeah,
I'm in Ohio.
Seattle.
Eastern time, Ohio.
Awesome. And yeah, we have Sharon saying she's the ninja. So
yeah,
I'm ninja. Karina says, what if people have been baptized, or what if others not baptized? Does that matter?
Well, if you're not, then with the way things are, you know, I have a book translation that I did called the Didache. It came out of the Greek. I think it was written by Barnabas, but in there it says that if you can't get to water, can't get to a stream or a river, you know, then take 3 buckets of water and pour it over your head, you know, and I'm adding the words in the shower, you know, just get in the shower, but pour the water over your head 3 times if you got to do it that way, because it's an alchemy, it's an transformation. You're going through a gate. You're changing your paradigm, because once you enter a covenant relationship with your Redeemer, the old world doesn't matter. You're moving into the second phase of your nature of being second born. It's not about reborn. It's about being second born, because the firstborn was born into the darkness of this world. That's why it said we had to be born again. But the term is second born. Second born. Okay? And if you read the old covenant stories, you'll see it. You'll see it in the the stories of Isaac and Ishmael and Jacob and Esau. It's all there. The second born is the one that is chosen.
So Karina is saying here also, what if we've done things in the past we're not proud of? Do we ask for forgiveness?
Sure. It's easy. You know, he doesn't want to beat us up. He wants to love us. He's just trying to wake us up. That's what it comes down to. It's about waking up to the mystery of life, of who we are, where we are, when we are, and why we are.
She's also saying here she wants to wash away baptism from the cult of Catholicism.
Well, you're not going to stop what they're doing. It just matters what you're doing.
Okay, well, I think that was it for questions. Someone said if you could share some of the books in the comments, but Cassia, she put a link to the Amazon link, so once this is over, that'll be kind of at the end, so you can just click on to see where all his books are, because there's 27 books, and yeah, I'm sure we're not interested in typing them all 27 books out right now, but
thank you, Cassia. Thank you so much, Peter.
Yeah, she put the link in there. Awesome. I know a load of questions. Thanks for answering. Oh, questions are great. That's the thing. Most people don't even ask enough questions. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with questions. And if we get a chance to put them up and ask them, we do. No matter who's on. If I see good questions, I try to put them on. And Desert here has been good enough to stay around to answer some of the questions. So thanks so much for that, Desert.
My pleasure.
Let there be light, Sharon says.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much for being a part of the Missing Link here. We are broadcasting. This is our 4th, 5th, 6th interview this week. So we've been trying to look to get as much people's information out there. We are going to have Karen Anderson on on Monday, so we've got another special Monday at noon as well, Eastern Standard Time, so the same time as this one started. She believes that she's got a link to a prophecy and kind of knows what's going on, and that way she's really studied scriptures and been a big part of that, so we look forward to talking to her. We really appreciate you, Desert Owl, for, spending this, 3.5 hours with us, sharing all the information that you can with us. And, this has been great. And yeah, I'd like to talk to you about, possibly, doing more things with you, because, this is awesome. A lot of people saying hearts and thank you. And thanks, Jesse. Very informative. So much to take in, very enlightening. Thank you. Fantastic live. Thanks, guys. So, a lot of people appreciating this information. So, thanks so much, Desert. This was great. This is what it's about. Love inspiring new knowledge.
Way to go, Jesse. You're doing great work. I'm very honored to be here today.
Awesome.
Well, I'm talked out, I got to tell you. I'm feeling it. So, I'm going to take a nap, I think, a senior citizen nap now.
Awesome. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate everybody who's been a part of this, that stayed here for a good part of 3.5 hours. I know some people have been here since the beginning, so appreciate that. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for sharing this out, and thank you for making the Missing Link what it is. It's because of all of you that are here, that are listening to this. It enables this Missing Link to continue on, and knowing that people are getting something out of what we're able to bring to you guys kind of on a weekly basis.
Peace and love, brother.
Peace and love, and thanks. Excellent. Thank you both. Thanks so much. Thank you, Jesse and Desert. I didn't go to my garden. Someone was going to go to her garden, but this was too fascinating. Thank you both. Lots of hearts. And yeah, so this was awesome. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks again, Desert Owl. And we'll see you Monday, noon Eastern Standard Time with Karen Anderson. So bye, everyone.
Bye.